Hello to everybody for this week's David 67 Celtic News live stream. Good to see there's been a few people joined already. Sorry, a wee bit of a delay just getting all the IT stuff working and just double checking on a wee couple of news stories that have been breaking over the day. Nice to see some familiar names and faces in the comment section. Let's hopefully try and keep the debate, discussion, sharing of opinions nice and respectful and pleasant, etc. Particularly looking, I think, at this time in the international break, at taking things forward, looking to the future. Celtic obviously at the moment have a caretaker interim manager. Good evening to you as well, Pope Leo the 14th. I'm not doing a wee bit of a cold at the moment, unfortunately, so we might not keep on going as long as we often have before, but we'll certainly try and do a few hours this evening and get a good chance for everybody to discuss things. Hi to you as well, McLaughlin P. Hi to everybody. Breezy Ice is a really interesting question. I think it's not possibly really a question of who I would want to be the Celtic manager. It's more who is wanting and willing to come and be the Celtic manager at this stage in the season. I think would have been a lot of merit in getting Ange Postecoglou to come back to the club. I think a forward-thinking manager. He clearly took Celtic to 5 trophies in 6 years. However, he got sacked twice within a few months of each other. He doesn't look like he's planning to go back into football management until next year. The current favourites for the job would appear to be Wilfred Nancy of Columbus Crew, Kjetil Knutsen of Bodo Glimt, Kieran McKenna of Ipswich. Those 3 appear to be, according to lots of different news stories, the 3 that Celtic are particularly looking at. I think all 3 of them have their merits. All of them are pretty much the same number of games as a manager, all around about the 200 mark. Knutsen obviously has won 4 titles in Norway, European success. Nancy at Montreal, then at Columbus Crew, 3 trophies. Both Knutsen and Nancy are very much forward-thinking, attacking managers, play a different style from what Celtic have played before, but not too different from it, so it shouldn't be too difficult for those players to learn the new system. However, there appear to be 1 or 2 wee hold-ups with both Knutsen and Nancy, so it's difficult to know, but obviously I'm really happy. Be great to hear what everybody feels themselves. We'll just put that wee question up. There are 1 or 2 other names in the frame. Robbie Keane, new name. Someone's put forward is Brian Barry Murphy, currently manager at Cardiff, but came through the Manchester City coaching team. Very successful with the younger players at Man City. He's another name that's been thrown into the marketplace. Reportedly today or tomorrow, there's meetings between the Celtic executive people, the board people, and Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney as to what the long-term plan is in terms of extending their interim manager job. Good evening to you as well, Lauren. Great to have you back on the live stream. Great to have Monty and Sligo Boy and Clashman Numpty. Lots of different little opinions going on in the comment section was good. Try and keep things nice and pleasant if we can. It just keeps YouTube happy. Good evening to you, Clashman Numpty. Good evening to you, Clashman Numpty. Good evening to everybody. So it'd be great to hear what everybody else feels themselves regarding who they would want to be the next Celtic manager. Whoever Celtic get, I think it should be a relatively young manager, an up-and-coming manager with new ideas, who's also got an ability to work within the framework that Celtic have used for the last 25 years. In that both Knutson at Bodø/Glimt, Nicky Hayden, another person being put forward as a possibility, and Nongsi at Columbus Crew have all kind of worked within the framework of bringing in young players, developing them, good transfer policy, good recruitment policy, which I think has been a factor at Celtic not really being the case. Yep, Clashman Numpty. You were one of the first people to put forward, certainly in my sphere of discussions, the name of Wilfred Nancy. Very, very highly respected in Major League Soccer. He was the manager of the year in 2024. So last season, he was the manager of the league in Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer currently ranked the 10th most high prestige, high quality league in the world. Scotland, unfortunately, have dropped down to number 39 in terms of quality of league. And so Ben Boy 9, it doesn't look like it's necessarily going to be money to get in Knutson. It's more according to a story I was reading just before I came on, about 8:30, he seems to have a particular plan to keep on moving Bodø/Glimt forward. Last season, they got to Europa League semi-finals. This year, they're into the Champions League. They're probably going to be touch and go for getting into the knockout stage of the Champions League. They've got 4 more games, but they've got some really very difficult games to go. So he reportedly, according to one story, is looking to leave Bodø/Glimt. And according to a different story, it's saying that he is in the process of signing another contract with Bodø/Glimt. So I don't think it's necessarily a big contract offer that's going to tempt Knutson away. He's had a big contract offer from several different clubs and chosen to stay in Bodø/Glimt. Ajax were someone who came for him and turned it down. Yes, Martin, the story is that Knutson's contract is up either on the 1st of December, i.e. in about 3 weeks' time, or also the 31st of December, so Hogmanay night. So if in theory his contract is completely up at the start of 2026, it could even be up at the very end of November. So as Monty's saying in his comment there, the one story certainly is that Knutson is signing a new contract. That's according to one source in Norway. According to several other stories, that's not the case. Couple of stories last week, a couple of weeks before that, were suggesting Knutson had decided this was when he was going to be leaving Norwegian football and trying in a bigger league, a more higher prestige league. He's had offers definitely from Ajax and Amsterdam, turned them down. There were some stories saying that he saw Celtic as being a good stepping stone to for a few years before going to a higher club. Nicky Hayden, obviously, been a big success in Bruges. He's only been at Bruges for about a year and a half. However, he has brought success to them. He's done well in Champions League. he's midway through his contract with Bruges, so they would take quite a big compensation package to bring him to the club. That isn't necessarily a factor. Some stories are saying that Hean wants to come to Celtic. Some stories saying that he doesn't want to come to Celtic. I think at the moment there are so many stories going round and round and round, and as is always the case, and it's actually good business practice. Most of it's being kept behind the scenes. Breezy Ice, it's one theory. He certainly the story was he turned down the Ajax offer. He certainly seems very keen to take Bodo Glimt to the next stage. So many stories a week, 10 days ago were saying that he was going to come to Celtic, but he wouldn't be coming to Celtic until the Bodo Glimt Champions League season was over, which would be mid-late January of next year. Obviously, if they got through to the knockout stage, that would be even longer. He does appear to have, which in managers can be often very good, quite a bit of loyalty to the club. He he's had a long-term plan at Bodo Glimt, which has been part of their success. He's looked to keep on bringing in new players through academies, through getting the best young players in Norway and Scandinavia to come and play for Bodo Glimt. He's been very good in the transfer market. He's looked at some different leagues and other areas to bring in players. And so Celt 88, Robbie Keane, certainly somebody who is a controversial figure. A lot of Celtic fans automatically turned against him because he had managed in Israeli football for one season. He won the title in Israel, moved to Hungary, won the title with Ferencváros. They got knocked out in the Champions League qualifying around about the same stage that we did. He's continued to be successful in Hungarian football. Obviously, reportedly a lifelong Celtic fan. He spent 3 or 4 months playing for Celtic on loan. He scored an absolute ton of goals for Celtic in that loan season. He's reported to be quite an up-and-coming, adventurous attacking manager. He obviously, unlike quite a number of other managers, knows the history of the club. Grew up being a Celtic fan. As I say, some people have turned against him because he did live and manage in Israel. It would appear that he got out of living and managing in Israel as soon as he could. He cut short his contract and then moved to Hungarian football. So there are some, as Clashman Numpty suggesting, it would be a no from him in terms of giving Robbie Keane the job. So if this was Britain's Got Talent or America's Got Talent, he's already got one X against him. My personal feeling is that Celtic are looking at lots of different managers. Reportedly, Knutsen, Nongsi and McKenna were 3 that Celtic were doing some form of interviewing of over this week. I think that things are a bit different from how they used to be in terms of people sending in their CVs, sending in their applications. It's a lot more that things are done through recruitment agencies and agents and circulating with various different managers who may or may not be interested in the job. Knutsen, Nongsi, McKenna, Hean, have all been put forward. Keane's been put forward. Gary O'Neill had relative success at Wolverhampton. That all kind of fell apart. His transfer policy wasn't terribly good. I think whoever Celtic gets depends on availability, depends on who wants to come to manage Celtic. Some people wouldn't want the high pressure, goldfish bowl nature of coming to manage Celtic. It would appear as things stand at the moment, Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney are happy to carry on being the interim managers. Yeah, okay, breezy ice. Yeah, I don't personally have. What it would show is that in the Israeli league and the Hungarian league, which are probably a level below the Scottish Premiership, Robbie Keane is able to manage and succeed. He obviously came into Ferencváros from his 1 year in Israeli football and immediately took them to the title. He's maintaining that success in his second season in Hungarian football. If we also look at Wilfred Nancy, he's got a similar kind of profile. So Wilfred Nancy, 48 years old, currently managing Columbus Crew in the MLS, although they're out of the current American system. They got knocked out in the first playoff round. He was the head coach at Montreal for a couple of seasons, where he managed. He was initially Thierry Henry's assistant manager from 2016. Well, he was assistant manager there from 2016 to 2021. He managed with Thierry Henry for a couple of seasons. He was apparently a very big friend of Thierry Henry. Took over a couple of years in Montreal, 2 years now in America. Different stories regarding when his contract's going to be up. Some people are saying it's the end of this year. Some people are saying he's signed for a two-year extension to 2027. He's got 3 trophies in his career as a manager. One Manager of the Year award, and this is now his 20th season of being a coach or manager in all levels of football. He's worked his way up through college soccer, then into under 18, under 21 at Montreal, then first team at Montreal, assistant manager, Columbus Crew. Plays an interesting 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1. Very innovative coach, lots of new ideas, different theories, and has this Ange Ball style, supposedly, of never stop, constantly on the front foot, constantly attacking, and said to be a very good manager, motivator. One of the theories also with Wilfred Nancy would be that he would bring probably a fairly large backroom staff with him. Managing in America is a wee bit different from managing in Scotland in terms of recruitment systems and college drafts and all kinds of things. But it does look like at Columbus Crew, he came into a club at Columbus Crew, which was similar to Celtic, a lot of controversy and stramash and changes in the backroom staff, some in terms of the ownership of the club, some changes there as well. Managed with early on a lack of funds, managed to secure success, built up the funds, built up the recruiting system. He's managed some very, very apparently good quality footballers in Major League Soccer. Some have gone on to move from American soccer into European teams. Certainly, that some people are saying that he does have this sort of total football type of thing. He likes his players to be constantly on the move, supporting each other, likes attacking, keeping the ball, but gets the ball forward quickly, and does seem to have this, as some people are comparing him to Ange Postecoglou in terms of new ideas, motivation ability, the ability to come into a team or a club that's struggling and very quickly laying down his framework of coaching styles and tactics and formations. So he does appear to have sort of regular backroom staff that he brings with him from Montreal to Columbus Crew. And so if Celtic did bring him on, it looks like they probably would be bringing over 3 or 4 coaches as well. Whether that works coming to Celtic, I don't know. Oops. Hail, and welcome to you as well, Paul Maguire. Nice to have you back on. Nice to have a wee chat yesterday in the comment section of one of the videos. Yeah, Breezy Ice, yes, certainly he is one of the most highly respected managers in American soccer system, which is why he was manager of the year last year. It would appear Columbus Crew don't want him to leave. It's thought he does have a 2-year extension to his contract. Most contracts these days, you can there are various different clauses, and certainly some of the feedback is that he is keen to come and try his time managing in Europe. He is French by birth, played in France as a footballer, then moved over to Canada, got into coaching in Canada, and then he's worked his way up through the system in Canadian and then in American soccer. They call it soccer, we would call it football, but so highly respected. Great to have you back, Streams Love the Doctor. I think no one would really disagree with those things. In terms of the sorts of managers you want, wins things. Well, if we look at Wilfried Nancy, he's won 3 trophies. Nicky Hayen in Belgian football with Bruges, 3 trophies. Knutsen's won 4 in Norwegian football. He's in line to win a 5th title. Kieran McKenna hasn't won anything. He's been runner-up twice as a league manager with Ipswich. He got relegated with Ipswich last season. Admittedly, that was in the Premier League, the highest prestige league. Robbie Keane has won a couple of leagues in 2 different countries. Plays good football. I think all the ones we've been talking about, Nancy, Knutsen, McKenna, Hayen, all of whom play good football. Certainly change of style, change of formation with Hayen and Nancy, less so with Kjetil Knutsen. Kjetil Knutsen plays typically a 4-3-3 with fullbacks pushing forward as inverted fullbacks, wingbacks, which is kind of like the way that Brendan Rodgers sort of played, but particularly Ange Postecoglou played. Knutsen likes his wide players to come in and be extra strikers and goal scorers in the box. Again, a throwback to the way that Ange Postecoglou set up the team in his couple of years. Yes, Lauren. As I said, he is highly esteemed in American soccer. Manager of the year. Plays attacking football. Plays all action football. His record is about 50-50, as you're saying, in terms of winning games. 49.3% winning record. If we contrast that to Knutson's career win record over, admittedly, a lot more games, 541 games. His win record is 56.6. Martin O'Neill, the current caretaker manager at Celtic, his win record is 75.5, which is the highest of any Celtic manager of all time. However, if you look at Martin O'Neill's career record at all the various different clubs, he's down at 50.5, so just a wee bit better than Wilfred Nancy, a bit less than Knutson. McKenna, 46.3 career record at 188 games for Ipswich. And who was it? Hayden, 46.3 career record. So in essence, Knutson's got the best career record of all the four main contenders. And both Hayden, McKenna and Nancy are around about the same level as Martin O'Neill is over all his various different jobs at Leicester, Wickham, Norwich, Villa, Sunderland, and at Celtic. And at Celtic, however, O'Neill's record is beyond anybody's. Yes, Ronnie Dahlia was a success for more briefly. Ronnie Dahlia had a good season in American soccer. Nancy, as a manager, had a couple of successful seasons in Montreal, a couple of successful seasons with Columbus. This season not been quite so successful for him. Michael Beale might well have won some manager the 1 month, but he certainly didn't win any titles, didn't win any trophies, didn't win any manager of the years. Any success he had was rather brief. Certainly with all the ones we've been discussing, they've not just had brief success time as managers. They've won trophies, they've won leagues, they've won managers of the year. So I think one of the things with Wilfred Nancy is I think he has got job security at Columbus Crew. In that Columbus Crew don't want him to leave. That's much the same as Kjetil Knutson at Bodø Glimt. I can't see either Columbus Crew or Bodø Glimt sacking their managers, because those two have built up so much respect, and they've brought success to two clubs that weren't terribly successful before they came to their jobs. So it might be that bit more difficult for getting those two managers away. For both of them, it probably is a question of what their career aspirations are. Do they want to keep on managing at the same level, or do they want to move to a different country and prove they can manage in different countries and different leagues? Both the two of them seem to have had a plan to be sort of long-term careers at a club, particularly Knutson. Now, somebody did put forward Roberto Mancini, but the story I'd read was that he was just about to sign for one of the teams in Saudi Arabia. That's what. So I think we must have read the same story. Is that Roberto Mancini, who I thought was probably sort of pie in the sky, rather unlikely person to come to Celtic to be the manager. But then he's taken the big money and gone to Saudi football. That's reportedly where they're saying Brendan Rodgers is way off to. Some people are suggesting that's where Ange Postecoglou will be off to next year. Lauren, all was going on, I was watching a thing on Sky Sports this morning, and according to the Opta stats, the Major League Soccer is number 10 in the world. The English Premiership is number 1. The English Championship is number 7, and Scotland's down at number 39. I think people are putting up names like Pellegrini, Jurgen Klopp. I can't see any of those people ever wanting to come to manage Celtic. As things stand, I can't see how any of those very experienced multi-millionaire managers would want to come and manage in Celtic. I think all of them would get more trophies and more medals coming to manage at Celtic, but for them, I don't think they feel that would be something worthwhile doing. Now, there were stories that Jose Mourinho wanted to come and manage at Celtic. He's after being sacked during the summer when he failed to qualify for the Champions League. He's now got a new job. I personally don't see a manager like that wanting to come to Celtic. As much as I love Celtic, much as Celtic has this global brand system, we are playing in Scotland. The general quality of football isn't terribly good. The general quality of TV money, sponsorship, prize money, all these other things isn't terribly good. And so for experienced, established managers, most of them, unless they've got a real draw to Celtic, a real love of Celtic, aren't going to want to come and manage Celtic. But at the moment, I'm perfectly happy for Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney and Fotheringham and McManus and Strachan, etc., to remain in place. Celtic have won 3 out of the 4 games since that team took over. The players seem far happier. Team seem to be playing good quality football. Whether they would have played good quality football under Brendan Rodgers, we'll never know, because it may be, as so often can happen with players, things suddenly click. They start building bonds and teamwork and understandings of who likes the ball in certain places and who likes certain passes and who's better at defending this, that, and the other. Lauren, I have to admit, I don't watch terribly much of Major League Soccer. They do have one of the greatest players of all time, Lionel Messi, playing in their league. There is an increasing amount of money in Major League Soccer at the moment. They do have a fair number of players who go there preferentially, turning down contracts in Europe and so on. There are quite a number of players who've moved from Major League Soccer back into European soccer. I can't remember. There was a particular guy who's gone to Spanish football this season, has done incredibly well. So as I say, the Opta stats, people put the Major League Soccer as number 10 in terms of quality of football, quality of players, quality of competition, etc. I think the perception with Scottish football is that in terms of, let's say, the last 15 years, Celtic has been way ahead of everybody else in terms of winning things, win percentages, trophies, etc. Rangers a bit behind that, and then a big drop off to the Hibs and the Hearts and the Aberdeens. So I think the perception is that in Scotland there's one team who is way above everybody else in terms of quality and consistency in winning things year after year after year. Then another one, and then a big drop off of quality. Now that may well turn around with Hearts increasing their funding. Money's gone into Hibs, money's gone into Aberdeen, so maybe Scotland's quality will go up and up and up. But at the moment, in terms of quality of players, quality of football, competitive nature of football, all these things, Scotland is down in the 3rd division. So, like a boy, certainly Scotland is a relatively small country. Our TV contract is low. Sponsorship of the Scottish League system is low. Prize money within the Scottish League system is low. So there are lots and lots of reasons that Scottish football is low down in any kind of financial leagues. And in general terms, financial leagues also points towards the quality of players. Certainly, soccer, as they call it, wasn't a particular popular sport in America. They tried rebranding it and making it super successful in the times of Pele and Beckenbauer and stuff, and that kind of all fell apart. What is to be said about soccer in America is that it's a sport that's grown quite dramatically in terms of grassroots football. A lot of people moving to America, particularly from Central America, South America, from Europe, their kids then going to play soccer, and that's kind of worked its way up through the systems. Particularly popular game for young girls and women in America. That's really expanded, and more young boys, teenagers, etc., playing the game. That initially was mostly the people who had gone to live in America from around the world, but more and more Native Americans are playing the sport, and there is more and more money going into it. America, generally a team that gets through a round or two in the World Cup. They, of course, will be hosting the World Cup this summer, which is likely to have one or two extra problems. Certainly, the amount of money that Sky ploughed into the English Premier League, 20, 30 years ago, was absolutely incredible, and it took basically English football, English league system into a league of their own. Basically, took them certainly up to and past the Italy's and Spain's and Germany that had a lot more money. So the English Premier League's got the most money in the world. It's generally got the best players in the world. It's generally got the best managers in the world because it's got absolutely gigantic, big $1 billion per year, $1 billion TV contracts, which means that teams like Brentford and Bournemouth, tiny clubs, tiny grounds, tiny supports, have an incredible amount of extra money every year in terms of sponsorship, prize money, and especially TV money. I think personally, I'm not sure quite what the spin on that is, but something I think if Celtic got Knutson, Hayden, or Nonsey, or even McKenna, I think Celtic would be getting a really good manager. And I think for all those three, it depends on what their ambitions are, what their career progress is. It may be if I was Knutson or I was Nancy, I might I think, well, I've probably proven what I can prove in Norwegian football or in American soccer. It's maybe time to try myself in a different country, try myself at a different size of club. Club certainly like Celtic is a big global brand. Bodo Glimt, I doubt there are terribly many Bodo Glimt supporters in Sydney, Australia, or Toronto in Canada, or in any city around America, or even in the Far East, etc., like there is for Celtic. Celtic's got hundreds and thousands of fans pretty much in every big city in the world. Everywhere where Scottish people and Irish people went as part of their emigration has taken Celtic to those countries. It's not really the case for many other clubs around the world to have such a global branding. So Celtic is in terms of a football club, an absolutely gigantic club, except unfortunately we are a gigantic big fish in a very small pond in terms of you and I obviously were watching the same programme earlier today. The supposed football expert Jamie O'Hara was saying that Stockport County, who are currently leading the English First Division, will come in and win the Scottish League, no bother at all, and they're far better than any team in Scotland. He was also suggesting the top four clubs in the English First Division would all come in and be title challengers in season 1 in Scottish football. Not quite sure what he was basing that on. Certainly comparing the couple of times where Scottish clubs played against English clubs last year in Europe. We lost 4-2 to Aston Villa in our last Champions League match. I think Rangers drew both against Spurs, the eventual champions, and they drew against Man United, or maybe they lose to Man United. But anyway, they drew definitely with Tottenham Hotspur. So thank you very much, Sligo boy. Jamie O'Hara. I think Jamie O'Hara, like an awful lot of supposed football pundits, experts, I think he realizes if he's controversial, if he's rude and nasty about people are going to phone in, people are going to tune into his program, and I think it boosts his ability to earn money as a supposed football expert. Wasn't a player with a particularly distinguished career record. He and Jason Cundy used to form a sort of double team type of thing, neither of which really reached the heights of high quality football. But the two of them have got themselves a reputation, a wee bit similar to what Chris Boyd does, Michael Stewart. I think they quite often create controversy and fights and disputes and say controversial things simply to try and rile up interest and rile up people phoning in and watching the programs. Good point, Celt88. Certainly, I don't think the people at the SFA and SPFL, etc., I think they could have been doing a far better job in terms of marketing the Scottish League. I think they could have done a far better job in securing contracts with Sky and various other different broadcasters. To give the English Premier League lots of credit, they have contracts with lots of different broadcasters. Scotland, admittedly, this year has got a contract for the league for both Sky and Premier Sports. Premier Sports obviously do the cup games. So it may be that the Scottish Football Association, SPFL, etc., are doing a better job trying to market the game and get more money into the game. I think also if there's money coming in terms of people buying into Hearts, buying into Hibs, buying into Aberdeen. Obviously, quite a bit of money went into Rangers this summer from the American people. I think there's an argument to say that the deal that Scotland had with the Scottish leagues had with Setanta Sports, that kind of backfired. It was a similar contract, I think, with the English Championship. The English Championship very luckily got bailed out by Sky Sports with a gigantic big TV contract. For one reason or another, Sky didn't put a similar amount of money into the Scottish League system TV contract. And not too surprisingly, the English Championship has become a stronger and stronger and stronger league, reportedly the 7th strongest league in the world, and Scotland are way down. Yep, I think it's sluggable that you're pretty much saying what I'm saying regarding this Setanta Sports one. Yep, and yes, and then we Setanta bailed out. Sky didn't come back in. We then got a small contract with the BBC. Yes, and the thing that I did about the various different candidates this morning was just what I gleaned from looking at various different websites and internet sites and transfer market, SofaScore, etc. I'm by far not an expert, and so there are lots and lots of interesting, clever people out there who can do much better in-depth analysis than an old amateur like me. But one of the great things about YouTube is there are so many different opinions you can seek, so many different levels of expertise you can seek. Some people are fans only, like me. Some people actually are proper experts who have coaching badges and stuff. Yes, well, football was a very different sport when I started supporting Celtic. Not very many games were live on television. It tended to be the cup finals were live on television, international matches, Scotland, England, etc. Home championships were live on television, but not terribly many games were live on television. There was weekly highlight shows with Archie McPherson and Dougie Donnelly and Arthur Montford on STV the following day, but not terribly many live games. Nowadays, you can't move for live games all the time on Sky Sport. It's pretty much back to back live games from all over the place all day long nowadays, and on a Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. It's yes, well, you make a good point, Monty. Talking about the new manager is one plank in moving things forward. I think the thing though is with someone like Knutson, Nancy, possibly with Hayen as well, they will bring their own coaching staff. They may well bring their own recruitment staff. But even if they don't, they will still bring all the ideas that have worked so well at Bruges, so well at Bodo Glimt, and in a different way work really well at Columbus Crew and at Montreal. We seem to have lost our head of scouting, who wasn't who I thought our head of scouting actually was. He's gone off to Swansea. Swansea then, I think, sacked their manager pretty much the same day, which must lead the head of scouting in a bit of a difficult situation. Obviously, Darren O'Day, who used to be at Celtic and as one of the academy younger team coaches, he went off to Swansea. I dare say his job is now in danger. But I think for Celtic moving forward, they need to change a lot of things behind the scenes, scouting, recruitment. I think they need to massively improve their global network. I think they need to be, if they're not doing it already, I think they need to expand their analytical section. Reportedly, Celtic did have football analysts as part of their team. It would appear that that hasn't been working terribly well. Certainly Bruges, certainly Bodo Glimt, and several other clubs, Red Bull Salzburg in Austria seem to have really good networks for finding players, often finding players from less fancied leagues or less fancied countries. reportedly, Celtic's head of scouting was this guy Lefebvre, who, as I say, is off to Swansea. My understanding was that the head of scouting was primarily sort of Paul Tidsdale. He got that appointment partly on the say-so of Brendan Rodgers, partly on the say-so of other people within the club. I think things did seem to be better in terms of scouting and recruitment under Ange Postecoglou. Some of his staff moved on with him. Some of his staff moved on at the same time as him or just after him. Certain people got brought in, as is often the way with a new manager, they bring in their own staff. And Rodgers, for his 2.5 years of Celtic, had a mixture of people that he brought with him, people that he brought in later on, and the people like Kennedy, Strachan, etc., who'd been there for years and years. There is flu very much going around at the moment. There is supposedly a new variation on COVID going around at the moment. There's also a virus called respiratory syncytial virus. It's a really nasty one to get. I wasn't aware that avian flu was a particular thing in Scotland at the moment or in Britain at the moment. It certainly is a gigantic problem in America. But Lemsip wouldn't be powerful enough to kill off avian flu, and avian flu reportedly doesn't travel from birds into human beings, apart from very occasional cases. Very interesting information. Coming back to one of the other candidates, reportedly who is interested in coming to Celtic, and Celtic are interested in getting him, Kieran McKenna. He is as well as being a coach at various different English clubs, he also got a sports degree from Loughborough University. So he is said to be a manager who is very, very good at analysing opposition, very good at analysing his own players. He is said to be very meticulous in terms of his tactics. He tweaks things from game to game. And he's said to be an extremely well-prepared coach. One could argue that it didn't work terribly well for him last year at Ipswich, although it's not at all unusual for teams obviously like Ipswich to go up to the Premiership and back to the Championship and then back up and down. Burnley's been like that. Sheffield United's been like that. Norwich were a bit like that, although they seem to have gone down again from that level. But there's been a lot of teams kind of yo-yo from Championship to Premiership to Championship to Premiership. Although Ipswich this year haven't really got going in terms of getting back in the promotion race. Well, I think it's certainly for I think in terms of looking in the longer view for Celtic this season, I think Celtic have got with our current bunch of players, the players that can win the title for us. Yes, Dr. Strangelove, the Doctor, as I was saying in my wee profile of McKenna, he hasn't actually won anything so far. He's had a couple of runners-up in the league. He did win Manager of the Year, has had 4 Manager of the Years in his 4 years as coach. Some of those Manager of the Year awards were 2 in the same season. But as I say, plays a 4-2-3-1, which is a wee bit different from the system that Celtic ordinarily play. His win record is under 50%. He's only managed at Ipswich. He has actually managed at lower levels and been coaching staff at many different clubs, Man United, etc. Is thought to be a very intelligent manager, plays attacking football, possession football, believes in robust defence, it said, does change his tactics, his formation from game to game, which can be difficult, particularly his preparation, and said to be a good manager in terms of developing players and bringing them through and restoring confidence in players who have lost their mojo. So make a good point there. One could say that Kieran McKenna is much like Russell Martin. I think possibly with Kieran McKenna, we've also got the fact that he had quite a long history building himself up through various different very big clubs, coaching academy, younger players, etc. So he maybe, unlike Russell Martin, had much more of a back catalogue of building up his skills in lower levels of football within big clubs and stuff. Sorry. I think that one of the problems nowadays in wherever you're managing is difficult to get at a club long enough to really put in a plan of action. Nowadays, managers scarcely get 4 or 5 games to prove themselves. You look at Ange Postecoglou, sacked by Spurs, given the Notts Forest job, sacked by them, I think within, 39 days, about 8 games he got to manage Nottingham Forest. Obviously, Russell Martin had 3 months or so to manage Rangers. His results were poor. The behind the scenes at Rangers was poor. He got sacked very quickly. Before that, Rangers sacked their managers, Van Bronckhorst, Beale, Clement got a couple of years. Gerrard actually got quite a long time to be successful before he was successful in his one season with that one title. Just trying to say that people don't tend to get the freedom that certainly Knutsen got at Bodø Glimt to build up his way of playing. Knutsen's been at Bodø Glimt now for 7 years. So he had a couple of years where he wasn't successful, and then he's won 4 titles since then. So he, maybe unlike quite a lot of other managers, was given a couple of years to really build into the club. I think anybody who comes in to be Celtic manager pretty much has to win the league and win a double every season, otherwise nobody's happy. Then even if you win a double or a treble, we've got to succeed in Europe. So I think the demand for success at Celtic is incredibly high, and I think that may be why some of the things which I think are important at clubs, such as developing good academy structure, good bringing through of young players into the first team, good recruiting of players from around your country. So in our case, Scotland, United Kingdom, Ireland, etc. So I think one of the things I personally think that Celtic should do with whoever the new manager is have a true 3-year, 5-year plan to try and put into place really good scouting, really good recruitment, looking at various different markets to get players in, develop those players, etc. But I think also another thing that Celtic really need to do, as I said before, is go all in on getting the best young Scottish, English, Welsh, Irish, Northern Irish players and getting them into our academy structure as 14, 15, 16-year-olds, and then really develop them through the club. Will help no end in terms of things like the UEFA quotas of 4 homegrowns and 4 Scottish trained players. Yes, when I last looked, certainly Ireland were 2-0 up over Portugal. Liam Scales had given an assist, as you were saying, for the first goal. Both the goals were by Parrott. Our ex-players, Mikey Johnston and Adam Eder, were on the bench. So was Johnny Kenny. One of our other ex-players, O'Shea, was playing. O'Shea was a player that we were looking to buy rather than the player that we did buy. So quite a number of ex-Celtic players and current Celtic players in the Irish squad that was doing quite well. So good question, Clashman Numpty. As I've said in some comments, and I said in the video I did today, I personally think Celtic should be looking to get their new manager in by early December. The reason I think we should get a new manager in by early December is it gives that new manager a month to lay down what they're looking for in the transfer window. Gives them another month, obviously, in January to really put that into practice and move things forward. I think one of the benefits with bringing in someone like Knutson or McKenna or Hayden is they already will have had players at their previous clubs where they were looking to bring in certain players in the winter window. I think the budget at Bruges is much the same as it is at Celtic in terms of player recruitment, player contracts, etc. The amount of money that Celtic can offer a player in terms of transfer fees, salaries, bonuses, etc., is going to be much bigger than it is at Bodo Glimt. However, so I think those sorts of managers would bring the players they've been looking for, and then fit that in with our existing recruiting and scouting structure. So my personal feeling is that we should get that new manager in December. Some people are suggesting that Martin O'Neill will carry on being the manager through December into January. I think if O'Neill was still the manager at the start of 2026, there's an argument to say that O'Neill should then still be the manager for the duration of the rest of this season, simply because a lot of the benefit of the January transfer window would be lost, because it wouldn't be the long-term manager who was going to be taking things forward, unless Celtic had some kind of pre-contract agreement that certain manager would come in to be Celtic's new manager on the 1st of June. And then you could liaise with scouting and that manager as to who they wanted to get brought in during the first transfer window, and then who wants brought in the second transfer window. Yes, Clashman Numpty, you a really good point. Obviously, Mikel Onge Balakwisha, who is now a Celtic player, came up through various different teams in Belgium, primarily Antwerp. He now is committed to play for the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's he's on the bench. He was on the bench earlier on. His brother already played for the DRC. His parents were from there, and you're quite right. There's a large number of people of African origin living in Belgium, similar to there's a large African population living in France, less so in Italy. And I think the African market is a market that Celtic is very, very really tapped into. A lot of the bigger, better scouting systems do look to get players in from Africa, and I do think that we need to spread our net further and further wide afield. That would be a benefit of potentially of getting in Wilfred Nancy coming from Major League Soccer. He obviously, for the best part of 20 years, has been managing and coaching at various different levels. He's been he was in the Montreal system as an assistant manager from 2016. So he's got 10 years of experience being a coach assistant or full manager in Major League Soccer. So he's clearly going to know a lot about the best players in South America and North America. A lot of the players who move to play for Major League Soccer teams come from Central America, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, etc., etc. The Lord, you make a brilliant point. That would be the main reason I would want a new manager in by December is simply that way we could get the maximum amount of benefit out of the January transfer window. A lot of stories circulating today, especially that Everton are very much looking to sign Dijsselmeyer in the winter transfer window. That Dijsselmeyer is keen to get to go to the English Premier League or a similar high-powered, high-prestige, high-money league. I think also there's a fairly high chance that Hatate will move on. Fairly high chance, that Yang will move on in that window. Other thing that we need to bear in mind in January is that Sebastian Juniecki and Mikel Ongbalakwisha are both going to be away on African Cup of Nations duty. Possibly Kelechi Iheanacho might go off with the Nigerian squad. He's not been in their squad for nearly a year, and obviously he's injured at the moment, so it's unlikely he's going to put himself forward to get into the Nigerian squad. But we're certainly going to be a couple of players down, probably from the African Cup of Nations. We may well lose 2 or 3 players in transfers, and so I think we certainly would need to replace those players. I think we also need to plan ahead to the summer of 2026 and beyond. With most players, it does take a bit of time for players to come into a club and really start playing at their best. Few come in really quickly, and it's often you can't really tell if a player is going to be a quick adapter to a system or a slow adapter to a system until the person actually comes in and moves into the country, moves into the team, moves into the coaching setup, the training setup, etc. I agree with you. I think it's not a good option. However, if Celtic can't get the candidate they want to come in and manage the team straight away, as would appear to be the case with quite a number of the people who have expressed a vague interest in coming into the club. So there's been Knutson apparently has expressed a vague interest. Nancy has expressed a vague interest. Kieran McKenna has. Kieran McKenna is midway through a £5 million a year contract with Ipswich. Getting him in would cost a lot of money, assuming that he wants to break his contract at Ipswich and come to Scotland. Obviously, signing Hayen from Bruges, much the same. He's partly through a contract. Knutson and is definitely at the end of his contract. Nancy may or may not be towards the end of his contract. So I think Martin O'Neill would do very, very well as a manager and a recruiter in the transfer window. I think he would be a very good person for attracting players to come and play in Scotland. I think he would do a very, very good job of selling the idea of playing for Celtic, selling the global branding of Celtic, selling the great historic success of Celtic, selling all the great things about Celtic. I think O'Neill would be a great ambassador for the club. I think he would do a really good job of convincing players who maybe are uncertain to come and play for Celtic. However, there isn't really any long-term mileage in having a 73-year-old manager. There aren't many clubs in the world who have a manager as old as that as their permanent ongoing manager. I think he's done a good job for Celtic so far. I think he's come in at a really difficult time and turned the team around in many ways. Yes. So I think we need a new manager in as soon as possible. Can't remember who it was last week who was saying that the stories that he heard were that Knutsen was going to be signing for Celtic this week. Well, it doesn't appear that Knutsen has signed for Celtic this week. It does appear that if Knutsen is going to sign for Celtic, it won't really be him coming to Celtic until mid-January of 2026. So we're talking another, two and a bit months away. And if we did wait for Knutsen to come in mid-January, we're going to lose at least half or more of the transfer window, unless there was some kind of system that we would be signing the players that he wants to come to Celtic to be his players for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years or whatever. What one can say in favour of Knutsen is he's managed, 7 years as Bodo Glimt's manager. He very much, when he came into their club, he had a long-term plan that he's put into place. It's worked really, really well. They've become more and more successful domestically, then kicked on and been successful in European football. And I do think that in terms of getting Celtic to the high levels that a lot of people want Celtic to get to, I think it's going to take quite a number of years. I don't think it's something we can do in 1 or 2 transfer windows. I think it's going to take a lot of changes behind the scenes in terms of recruitment, finances, scouting, etc. And it may be, if we did bring in a new face like Hayden, Knutsen, Nongsi, McKenna, etc., it may be that the experiment with Paul Tinsdale, which doesn't, for me, really seem to have worked out at all well for Celtic. I think a lot of the things that he was brought in for at Celtic have gone backwards rather than forwards under his time in the role that he's had. So it may be that we bring in a Knutsen, a Nongsi, etc., that they bring in their own people and we start afresh, but we actually start going forwards, not backwards, in terms of player development, player recruitment, player scouting, etc. Yes. I can't remember who it was last week, and if you're in as part of the comment stream, not criticising you in the least bit, because when I wake up in the morning and I read all the various different stories on the various different websites and news sites and watch some of the videos on YouTube and so on, there are hundreds and hundreds of stories and hundreds of theories, and you never know quite what to believe. And everybody claims that they're an expert. Everybody claims they're an insider. But certainly somebody last week was suggesting that Knutsen was on the verge of signing for Celtic. And maybe he still is. Maybe he still is. Maybe that had it not been for the fact that Bodo Glimt are going in, like every other team, they're going into a 2-week shutdown for the international window. Then I think they've got 1 or 2 games left in their league system. I think they're on the verge of winning another title in Norwegian football. They're either 1 point ahead or 1 point behind going into the last couple of games of the season. So it may be that if things were just timed a wee bit better, that we could get him in right at the start of December. But it looks like that's maybe not going to happen, but who knows? Clashman Numpty, as you so often do, make an excellent point. I think whoever Celtic convinced to come and be their new manager, you are entirely right. They're going to come with a list of requests, a list of demands, a list of things that they want to be in place before they come to Celtic. Obviously, for players like managers like Nancy, Knutson, Hayden, it's going to mean quite a big change in where they live, their families, their friends, their completely different change of culture, country, etc. Wee bit less so if we were going to get Kieran McKenna to come from Ipswich in England up to Scotland, but still quite an upheaval for friends, family, etc. for him. And so I don't see any new manager coming in without an assurance is this is what the structure is going to be. This, if you want to bring in your own coaches, your own recruitment manager, etc., we'll work within that framework. And this is the amount of money we'd be looking to this is the amount of money we would be looking to give you in the January transfer window. This is the amount of money we'd be looking to give you in the summer transfer window. That any player sales in January and in the summer would be then added to the transfer pot. I can't see any manager agreeing to come to the club unless that was the case. Especially when they're moving from a place where they are relatively safe and successful, coming to Celtic, where being a success is measured in different parameters than for many other clubs in the world, where winning the league is not enough. Ronnie Deila won the league a couple of times with Celtic, and for most people that wasn't enough. He got quickly moved on. Rodgers and Postecoglou won doubles and trebles in their time. Neil Lennon won doubles and trebles as well. But it seems as if you win a double or treble, that's not good enough because we have to be doing better than Europe, which is fine. I've got nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with having ambition, but I think for any club, winning the league is the first priority. Then winning a cup or two is the next priority. And I think when you're in the level of prestige of Scotland's leagues, doing well in Europe is another thing to aspire to. And I think long-term plans is what's the key, such as Bruges, such as Bodo Glimt, for success in Europe. And I think because Celtic's had quite a few changes in terms of manager and scouting staff, recruitment staff, etc., over the last 5 years or so, with Lennon moving into Postecoglou, moving into Rodgers, moving to whoever's going to be the new manager. I think there's been quite a lot of upheaval in terms of all those backroom staff, backroom recruiting, scouting, etc. And I think also a lack of continuity in terms of player development and a sort of conveyor belt of moving players through, which is very much something that Bruges have done with a couple of different managers in succession, and Bodo Glimt's done under Knutson for the last 7 years. Someone was asking about the last time Scotland at the World Cup in 1998. It was yet another of Scotland's glorious so near and yet so fars. We did pretty well in terms of the games, but we didn't get through to the next round, and that's been pretty much the case in every single international tournament that Scotland's ever been to. I think Scotland had a pretty difficult group in France. We didn't do too badly in the games, but this has always been the difficulty for Scotland, particularly in recent years, What we really lack is a top level striker who can put away chances and half chances. If we'd had a Harry Kane or a Gary Lineker or any number of players, if only Gary Lineker had a Scottish granny or something, we could have recruited him, and I think he would have banged away a lot of chances for us. Unfortunately, we've had good, decent strikers, but no real superstar goal scorer. Just give me a second. Great to see some more people joining. It's always lovely to have a variety of voices, a variety of opinions. Great to have you on as well, Bonnie. Great that the David 67 channel has reached the far-flung edges of the world, and it comes back to something we're talking about, the fact that Celtic is a club unlike very, very few in the world, with such a massive global branding. Supporters clubs, supporters all over the world, massive number of supporters in Australia, Canada, all across North America, tons and tons of Celtic fans across Europe, tons and tons of fans in the Far East as well, Japan, Korea, etc. Pretty much everywhere where Scottish people and Irish people have gone, Celtic's gone as well. Well, I don't know whether other people would agree. I certainly think if Celtic were to play, personally, play any team in the English Championship, they would beat them, and they would beat half the teams at least in the English Premier League at the moment, particularly with the way that Celtic are playing at the moment. But it's really difficult. It's always a really, I think it's always a bit of a moot point, a debating point only, to say, oh, if Celtic were to play Stockport, where would they come? The thing is, if Celtic were parachuted into the English Championship or parachuted into the English Premiership, they automatically would get them gigantic amounts of money that those leagues get from prize money, sponsorship money, and TV money. Plus, you would then get the extra prestige of being in those leagues, i.e. the number 7 league in the world and the number 1 league in the world. And then that automatically makes players much more keen to come and play for your team, because you're playing in that league in that country, which has got the gigantic amounts of money. So I think the point that Jamie O'Hara was making this morning is completely and utterly stupid. And also, it's also a thing that you can never ever prove. But I think it's a good debating point and an academic point to say how Celtic would do if they were in another league. The other thing is, if we were in another league, we would get all the benefits of being in that league, which I think would automatically kick on Celtic 3 or 4 levels up the ladder, simply by being in that league with more prestige, more money, more advertising, more prizes, more TV money, etc. Yes, I agree, Clashman, up to you that in essence, I have to say, when we signed Ange Postecoglou to be the manager, I was quite disappointed. I had heard of Postecoglou in terms of him being the Australian manager, and then obviously he'd gone on to be a good success in Japanese football. Wasn't really a league that I followed particularly at any time. Had been aware that he had done a good job, as I say, at in Australian football and then Australian international football. He took Australia through the qualifiers, through the first group stages into the knockout stages. Let's say Postecoglou wasn't a name I'd really heard of, but he was 5 trophies in six out of 6, really, really successful. So I think whoever Celtic do sign, it's going to be we as Celtic fans need to support him 100%, and everybody get behind him. Everybody give him a chance to be successful. And see, they're just noticing today that that a name being put forward is Brian Barry Murphy, who currently is managing Cardiff. They are right to the top of the English First Division. He recently had moved on from the Manchester City coaching staff, apparently very, very highly respected coach at Manchester City. They're a club who's obviously produced quite a number of good coaches and managers over recent years under the Pep Guardiola system, who've gone on to be successes at other clubs and so on. So again, I'd heard of him as a player years and years ago. I wasn't aware that he had been relatively successful. So Liam Scales apparently has had a good game for Ireland. Wasn't playing from the way it appeared on the screen. It looked like he was playing sort of a left wing back role or sort of left sided midfield. He certainly wasn't in the back three, according to. I haven't seen the game at all, so I don't know. But looking at how things were set up on the screen in terms of his position, it looked like he was playing sort of a left wing back type role rather than playing in central defence, which is interesting. There are some people who feel that he might actually do better at Celtic playing as a left back than playing as a left centre back, because his passing isn't always as good as it could be, and obviously he's not the fastest of defenders, but tremendously hard worker, tremendously committed to the club. He's done very, very well. He was just about out the door when Brendan Rodgers came in. So then had a few injuries. Rodgers kept hold of him rather than selling him. Supposedly he was on the verge of moving to Aberdeen for 500,000, but because of the injuries, Rodgers reassessed him and kept him at the club, and then he's really progressed tremendously. But he's another example of a player that Rodgers had said wasn't good enough to play for Celtic, and then due to one reason or another, a bit like Yang staying with us through the summer, Scales got a second chance at Celtic, and very much took his second chance, and good, dependable player. As I say, I would really like, with the way that Celtic play, for his passing to be a bit better, a bit more first time, instinctive passing, which is one of his areas. He tends to be slower with his passing, and he doesn't have the best recovery speed if someone does beat him over the top, which is why he quite often gets stuck behind players over getting too close to them and giving away fouls and stuff. But he's played very well for Celtic, very dependable. He's also had very, very few injuries over the last 3 years for Celtic as well, which is unlike most of his central defensive colleagues. So my personal feeling is whoever gets Celtic gets as manager, we need to support them 100%, and get fully behind them, fully behind any changes they want to bring in terms of the playing staff, the coaching staff, the recruitment staff, because I think internal divisions and external pressure and protests and things being thrown at the players and etc. is for me completely counterproductive. I think if anybody out there works, the last thing you would want is people coming into your workplace and disrupting your workplace, destroying the confidence other people have got in you in terms of your ability to work within that system, in no matter what company, factory, job, hospital, lawyers, schools, whatever you do, the last thing you need is people from the outside putting unnecessary pressure, criticism, abuse on top of you, also destroying the confidence of the people that you're working with or leading. As I said, everybody is entitled to their opinion. I can have my opinion, you can have your opinion, Monty. We don't start needing to be abusive in the terms of the language you use to people. You can have your opinion, I can have my opinion. I'm all for the fans protesting, but the fans need to get 100% behind the manager, 100% behind the club, 100% behind the players. It feels to me that since O'Neill's come in, that's what's happened, is the fans, the board, the players, the coaching staff behind them, all have got behind O'Neill and the players and pushed them forwards. And that's why whoever comes in to be Celtic's new manager, or if we continue having Martin O'Neill as our interim manager, everybody, no matter whether you're a player, a coach, a fan, a board member, an executive, or whatever, needs to be 100% behind everybody. Because if in your normal day's work, you wouldn't be able to tolerate Monty, it's pointless. We've gone through this week after week after week. I do criticise the board. You just don't hear me. You don't understand when I'm criticising the board. It's pointless. It's pointless debating something that's been debated for the last 4-6 weeks. Time for Celtic to move forwards. It's time for everybody to get behind the team. Anyway, we'll move on. Yes, thank you, Breezy Eyes. Yes, I think Martin O'Neill is taking the club forward. I think the club was going backwards. The club was stagnating. There's lots and lots of different factors, and I'll say for Monty's benefit, partly that was due to the board, partly that's due to scouting, partly the recruiting, partly the players, partly Brendan Rodgers. Things had stagnated, and everything. Sorry. Yes, so Breezy Eyes, totally agree. This is a time for, I think, other people have got different opinions. I think we should all get behind the team and that support them. That doesn't mean that we can't disagree with things. It doesn't mean that we can't politely, peacefully, respectfully give different opinions. It doesn't mean that we can't air those concerns with the powers that be. But personally, I think whoever comes in as new manager deserves 100% support, as do the players. So, Flashman Numpty, getting back to one of the topics that takes things forward in terms of the club. My personal preference, for a variety of reasons, would be Kjetil Knutsen of Bodø Glimt, in that he has developed a club using the sorts of principles I think that work really well. Good scouting, good academy, good player development, having interesting different ways of playing football, being full of ideas, being forward thinking, but also a manager who clearly, when he came into Bodø Glimt, had a plan of how to keep on improving the club year by year by year by year. So initially improved the club, made them a success in Norway, then a success in more and more into European football, took them to the last four of the Europa League last year, taking them into the Champions League, yet to be seen whether he's going to get them through to the next stage, the knockout stage. I think given the size of Bodø Glimt, the size of their squad, the amount of money, the supporter levels, etc., getting a team like Bodø Glimt through to the knockout stage would be successful. So I personally would go for Kjetil Knutsen. It looks like he may be wanting to stay at Bodø Glimt for a wee bit longer, whether that's just simply loyalty, whether he's got unfinished business at Bodø Glimt, i.e. next season he wants to take Bodø Glimt not just into the Champions League group stage, but definitely through to the knockout stage. Then year after that, knockout stage, win in the first level to get into the last 16. He certainly seems to be a manager who's got a long-term plan, and he knows year by year by year where he's going to go to. That's something also that quite a lot of people who know Wilfred Nancy at Montreal, but particularly at Columbus Crew, he has a plan of where the team's going to be this year, next year, the year after, the year after. He's got a long-term plan, and I think that's something that Celtic have failed to do. So the question would be whether offering Kjetil Knutsen a massive amount of money as his basic salary. Rodgers reportedly was on £3.5 million a year. That was way the biggest yearly manager salary Celtic had ever offered somebody, considerably more than Ange Postecoglou had before that, considerably more than any Celtic manager before. Whether money is the thing that would convince Kjetil Knutsen to give up Bodø Glimt and come to Celtic, whether that would be what would be the incentive to bring Hayen or McKenna or whomever to the club, we don't really know, because all these negotiations and stuff are behind the scenes, and there are plenty of people in the world for whom money isn't important. I don't know, can't really speak for yourselves, but when I was working, I turned down certain promotions and certain other jobs because I didn't want to, even though I was going to get paid more money, I didn't want to do different sorts of jobs and different sorts of responsibilities and stuff. So I was quite happy doing what I was doing. So for some people, money isn't the be all and end all. Some people have other career aspirations. Yes, good argument that Jimmy Tillin, big success in Swedish football, not really been a big success at Aberdeen. They previously recruited managers from Scandinavia. We had Ronny Dahlia from Norway. He won a couple of leagues, then he won 2 leagues and 1 cup for Celtic in his 2 seasons with us. That's pretty good in terms of success rate. Can't think of terribly many Scandinavian managers who've been super successful in England. Sven-Göran Eriksson was obviously Swedish, big success all over Europe, relative success as an international manager as well. Yes, so I think we could probably all find examples of Scandinavian managers who've done well and plenty of Scandinavian managers who've not done well. One of the good things with Scandinavian managers is in terms of culture, weather, society, language. A lot of Scandinavian people do very, very well in Britain. For virtually every Swedish, Danish, Norwegian person, their level of English is excellent. As I say, the culture, the food, society, a lot of different things. Weather is very, very similar in Scandinavia and Scotland. Ten Hag certainly was a name that other people have put forward. Again, I'm wondering whether, having managed Ajax and managed Man United, whether he would want to come to manage Celtic. I don't know. I think Celtic's an absolute. If I was a football manager, I would be delighted to come and manage Celtic. If I was the Celtic manager, I would never want to give up the job, especially if I say that I am a lifelong dedicated Celtic fan for 50 years or whatever. I would never want to give the job up. No, I haven't seen any posts from the Celtic Collective on Brian Wilson. Hopefully, whatever they're saying about Brian Wilson is taking the club forward, looking to work with people within the club, because I think having people who are working at cross purposes isn't good for any organisation, be it a football club or be it any kind of employer or anything in life. If things are happy behind the scenes, they can be happy within the organisation. I do try and read as many stories as I can. I can't read absolutely everything because things keep on changing, and I do actually have other things as well as doing these things. The interesting name that you bring up there, Breezy Ice, Damien Duff was certainly someone right at the start. A lot of people were putting forward Damien Duff as being a potential manager for Celtic. Admittedly, managed really well in company, obviously coaching time previously at Celtic, so that's a big bonus. Knows the club, knows the internal workings, knows a lot of the pressure of living in Glasgow, being a coach for the biggest team in Scotland. Good success in Irish football. He now seems to be working in some form of role for FIFA at the moment. A lot of people have said in the stuff I've read, certainly, that he is being lined up to be the new Ireland manager at the end of the current international campaign, assuming that Ireland don't qualify for the World Cup next summer. So a lot of people have been putting forward his name as being a potential manager of Ireland in 6 months' time. And that's part of the reason reportedly he's taken this part-time job with FIFA, doing sort of coaching and information gathering and player analysis and tournament analysis and all kinds of things. I think he was involved in some form of FIFA under-17 thing or youth level international type thing. My only real worry with Damien Duff is he's relatively unproven. A lot of the other names that we've put forward that we've talked about earlier today, many of them have had a couple of hundred games as a coach manager of a team at a good high level of league. Most of them, apart from McKenna, have won quite a number of trophies for their various different clubs. Quite a few of them who've operated under a system like Celtic operates of buying players in, developing them and selling them on. So Brian Wilson certainly seems to be on the Celtic board. As far as I can remember, as a non-executive, so a behind-the-scenes type person. He's been on the board for a very long time. Quite what his role on the board is, I don't know. The roles of people who are on the board who are not executives, apart from the chairman, are a lot less well defined. Some of them have got particular roles in different facets of the club. Some are much more involved with player development, some are involved with fans, some are involved with marketing, etc. I'm not entirely sure what Brian Wilson's role is on the board. It's non-executive, so he's not paid to do the job. Quite what his job is, I don't know. I think, personally, Balikwisha is a player who is going to get better and better at Celtic. It does appear that he, unlike Chuniek, he hasn't settled down at all well into Scottish life. He got very much thrown at the deep end. To have your debut game being a Rangers Celtic match when there's an awful lot of pressure and kerfuffle and controversy behind the scenes is difficult. It does appear that we had quite a number of players who prefer to play wide on the left rather than wide on the right. However, Balikwisha can play right and left. Juneki can play right and left. Maeda can play right and left. Jota, when he gets back fit, can play right and left. Yang and Forrest can play both right and left. So the thing about Balikwisha is he actually is a player who's played a lot of different positions, particularly in his time for Antwerp. He was a very, very highly esteemed younger player in Belgian football, came up through all the various different age group levels up to under 21, got a couple of injuries. That seems to have stalled his career. He does appear to be perfectly fit now. So I think Balikwisha could be like Nicholas Kuhn, in that Nicholas Kuhn took a long time to settle down into Celtic. His first 2 months or so for Celtic were quite poor. He wasn't that great in the half season that he came to Celtic, coming in from Austria. Then Nicholas Kuhn in his second season was absolutely brilliant, particularly for the first 6 months or so. So Balikwisha could be like Kuhn, something like 2 or 3 goals, 2 or 3 assists in his first 4 or so months of Scottish football. Brendan Rodgers put that down to the fact that Kuhn had a dental operation and so was a bit behind in terms of his fitness and health and stuff. That may be a factor. I think Balikwisha is a player with lots of talents. If you watch his past highlight reels of his previous time up in Antwerp and Belgian football and so on, he's a player obviously with a lot of skills, a good ability to score goals, create goals, beat a man, etc. Whether he is still struggling to get full match fitness and sharpness back after these couple of nasty injuries, I don't know. I think he's a player worthwhile persisting with. It does look like he's going to be absent from Celtic for the whole of January with the African Cup of Nations, which probably isn't very good for his career in terms of moving it forward. Cell 88. You from what we so the how he presents himself currently for Celtic doesn't suggest that he is the sort of player who's going to beat players for pace. Chineki's got that ability to beat players for pace. Maeda, obviously, Yang has a lot of pace, but the problem with Yang's, his final delivery tends to be very poor. However, if you think about a player like Lewis Palmer came theoretically to Celtic as a wide player. He had a really good, pretty much start to his season at Celtic in his first half of his season. Then everything fell off. He's gone to Polish football. He's been chained to Polish football. They play him as an attacking midfielder behind the strikers. and he has been one of the best players in the Polish league so far this season. So maybe Celtic need to put the square peg of Balikwisha into a square hole rather than trying to fit him into the Celtic structure that we've been using for years and years. So players can be at a club and maybe we don't know what their best role is. Certainly going over the years, plenty of players at Celtic have had their roles changed. Players who may have come into the club more as a left back end up being a centre back. Some players who start coming in as a centre back end up playing as a left back. Players like Greg Taylor changed their role. Alistair Johnson changed their role. They both took on sort of wing back, inverted fullback roles. Plenty of players have started as one thing and moved to being a different thing. Some players, particularly midfielders, drop deeper and deeper, become more defensive midfielders, etc. So with any player, it's often a question of adapting that player into your system. If they can't adapt them into your system, you maybe adapt your system to fit them into your team. It should be pretty self-explanatory that if you've got players in your team, players in your squad, and they aren't at their best if you play them as a right winger, maybe you don't play them as a right winger. Maybe you use them as a second striker. Maybe you use them as an attacking midfielder. Benjamin Nygren, his whole career was as a wide player or as a second striker. He wasn't playing very much in his previous life as a central midfielder. That's what Celtic played him as, because that's what Celtic felt they needed Nygren to play, was as a conventional central midfielder. Since O'Neill's come in, he's had in most of the games in Scotland, Nygren has had a more free roaming role, more of an attacking midfielder rather than a conventional midfielder, more the Matt O'Reilly style of midfielder rather than the McGregor, Hattati, McCown, Paolo Bernardo style of midfielder. So yes, you do change your system in part to fit in the players that you've got. Seems a pretty good idea. If you've got a big tall centre forward and a fast nippy inside forward, you maybe play the two of them together. So you use Sutton and Hartson with Larsson playing off them, going back a number of years. But there's plenty times you see what you've got in terms of your squad, and then you think, how can I get these 11 players, 16 players, etc. How can I get the best team out of this bunch of 16 first-team squad players? So maybe you do slightly change your system. Seems to me a perfectly good idea. No matter what company or organisation you work for, you look to see what your talent is and you try and use that talent to the best of your ability. Yes, so breeze the ice, exactly. So many of the managers that Celtic are talking about bringing in do actually have a couple of players behind the main striker, sort of attacking midfielders, second strikers, etc. It's kind of the system that Lech Poznan have kind of used Luis Palma in their system, and it seems to really, really worked out for them and for Luis Palma as a player. So Balikwisha would fit in fine into that kind of system where he's playing as a free roaming midfielder. I think one of the things with the system that Nonsi, Hayen, and many other managers like using that system is the players like that do need to drop back into midfield. Midfielders need to drop back and help out defence. So it's quite a fluid system as well. Particularly if you've got the four midfielders, you need the two wider midfielders to bomb forward. So you can use your Chinieckis, your Maidas, your Nygrens, etc. for that role. Balikwisha might work better in that sort of system as one of the four as well, if he's got less defensive responsibilities. But as I say, you see what players you've got in a squad, and then you turn them into actual players. I don't know whether many of you play the sort of the football manager, championship manager style games, but quite often one of the challenges is you take a team you've never heard of in a league you've never heard of, and you try and make that team the league winners. And so with that, obviously, you're trying to recognise talent, you're trying to meld players into a team, you're changing the tactics. You don't come with your preset 4-3-3, 4-4-2, whatever it might be. You look at your players and you turn them into the best players they can and the best players that they can. And there's a lot to be said for being a good manager and getting your players to play at their absolute best. And most successful managers are very fluid in terms of how they set teams up. They don't get bogged down in one simple formation and one simple tactic and only use that tactic. They do adapt. They do adapt their system. They do successfully change players from central players to wide players to central players. Jock Stein was a tremendous manager at recognising talent, adapting the team, fitting them in, or making the players able to play new positions very, very well. Yes, I think that's a very good sentiment, McLaughlin P. This is supposed to be a friendly debate, discussion amongst like-minded Celtic fans. All of us want Celtic to be the absolute best football club that we can. And so it's a wee bit of respect for each other, a wee bit of polite language. There's no need for swear words. There's no need for family-friendly language. It puts the channel potentially in peril if there's a lot of non-family friendly language. And it is supposed to be fun, and not all of us find it fun to have people abusing each other, swearing at each other, calling each other names, and much rather hear what other people's opinions are in terms of taking the club forward, carrying on the wee rebound and success we've had so far under Martin O'Neill, how you feel we're going to do for the rest of the season, all these kind of things. Thank you, Kane, for your contributions this evening. Yeah, that's a good philosophical point. Cell 88, yes. So, the good thing about Scotland is that we are definitely going to be in a playoff. In the playoffs, we could have a bit of an easier draw potentially. There are a number of the teams likely to come in second place. Are teams that Scotland on paper could and should beat. There are also going to be plenty of teams that Scotland are going to struggle against. Difficult to know quite how committed Greece are going to be on Saturday. In essence, all they've really got to work for is ranking points to try and keep themselves in the same pot as they are at the moment. I would expect that they're quite likely to sack their manager at the end of this qualifying campaign because they're not going to qualify. They're going to come third at best in our group. So I can certainly see Scotland, if they play well, getting a draw in Greece. That obviously keeps things open for the final game against Denmark at Hampden Park the following week. I think if Scotland played at their absolute best, if we had our best midfielders, McTominay, Gilmour, McGinn, etc., and we've got someone at the other end who can actually put the ball in the net, which is not really the case with people like Che Adams and and Dykes and so on. So not massively hopeful that Scotland are going to win the league, win their group, but anything can happen. Certainly that's quite a common point in terms of Scotland fans. The thing to be said in Clark's defence is he has qualified Scotland for a couple of European nations in a row. He's got Scotland at least into the playoffs of this World Cup. He obviously is having to manage and cope with the players that he's got. Unfortunately, in most cases, you can't go out and buy a £20 million striker, which is something that Scotland could do with, or a £20 million goalkeeper, which is what Scotland internationally could do with as well. Unfortunately, Stevie Clark's got to do with goalkeepers who are backups at their clubs. The only first-team goalkeeper Scotland seem to have at the moment is Scott Bain of Falkirk. All the other options Scotland have got are backups or third choices at various different teams. Yes. 1888 is a female, which we can see from so 1888 is a female because you can tell from the fact that we've got the little symbol, which tells us that 1888 is a woman. So whether that makes any difference, I don't know, but I've had plenty of nice, fun discussions with her over the years on quite a lot of different varieties of topics. So, and Celtic Football Club has always been a football club for all people, all genders, etc., etc. And so, great to have women football fans on the team. Lauren, who was on earlier on, another big fan of both Celtics teams, the women's team and the men's team. Big game for the women tomorrow against Rangers at Ibrox. I personally think that probably the board members and stuff is the last thing they want is Celtic fans shouting at each other, because I think they probably want the Celtic fans to be happy. I don't think they want the Celtic fans to be unhappy, because all the turmoil and protests and stuff off the pitch has a knock-on effect on the pitch. So I think a happy club on the pitch, happy club off the pitch, the two things go together, much like the case is in everything else in life. Things need to be happy on the pitch and off the pitch, in both sides of any company or marriage or relationship or friendship or whatever. Yes, so Clashman Numpty, as I said, he reportedly took on a similar situation at Columbus Crew, went into a Major League Soccer team which had been going through a bit of turmoil and changes behind the scenes, financial problems, player recruitment problems, player retention problems, and very much straight away brought in a different style of football, brought in a brand of football that the players very much bought into, and very quickly re-established Columbus Crew as being a big team in American Major League Soccer. Columbus is a relatively small market team compared to the big teams in New York and Miami and Los Angeles, etc. And so for Columbus Crew to be one of the challengers for the title, etc., was quite an achievement, because it's a small market team. relatively small supporter market, finances, television, etc., in terms of local television and so on. So he did a good job turning that club around, and as Clashman Numpty is suggesting, maybe he could do the same coming into Celtic. Oh dear. If we're still talking about Wilfred Nancy, Zape, apparently a manager with a lot of good ideas, massive, strong recommendation from Thierry Henry, quite a number of other European high-level ex-players, coaches, etc. have been singing his praises as well. Alistair Johnston worked with him for a couple of years at Montreal. He was absolutely full of praise for how good Nancy was as a manager, a motivator, a tactician, an innovator, etc. So if he is the person that Celtic gets, I think he's a good choice. He would probably be, as things stand at the moment, my second choice, in that he's more available than some of the other ones. I think there would be less controversy getting Nancy to come to be the manager rather than getting Robbie Keane, who's another name. I think he's a manager with a lot of experience. I say 20 years as a coach, and 4 years as as the number one manager of a club. So I think he's probably also at a stage where he should be and could be looking to move things forward. Okay. Certainly from the stuff I was reading about Nancy today, he does appear to have had quite a number of challenges to cope with in his couple of years as the Columbus Crew manager. Quite a number of his best players being sold to either other Major League Soccer teams or to European teams. However, he's done a good job of bringing in a player just as good or even better each time. I think also a manager who's strong with the players, manages them well, is also really good. I think for club discipline, club cohesion, etc., it's good not to have prima donnas. It's good not to have players who are too big for their boots or bigger than the club. We think back a number of years to a player like Pierre Van Hooijdonk. He was a player that was tremendously good in terms of scoring goals for Celtic, but did kind of get ideas above his station, kind of ruined team morale. He then moved off to Nottingham Forest. Similar story down there. At the same time as we had Pierre Van Hooijdonk, we also had one or two other disruptive players like Paolo Di Canio, another player who was only at the club a short period of time. I do think that having players as brilliant as those two is very, very good for a club. But also you need to have them disciplined, which if you think about a player like Eric Cantona at Man United, a player with a bad reputation for being very disruptive, and Alex Ferguson, for the most part, got Cantona playing for the team, playing for his teammates, and playing for the club, and it was a big, big success. So if Nancy is good at managing players and keeping them disciplined, etc., that's all well and good as well. certainly is one. I don't think Pierre Van Hooijdonk wanted to stay at Celtic in the longer term. I think, like a lot of players, and particularly players that followed him, he saw Celtic as being a stepping stone to a bigger, better league. Paolo Di Canio, a different sort of player. I don't think money necessarily was his. I think, again, his time at Celtic resurrected his career. He went back down to English football. No, the answer to that question is no. I think we should keep Sebastian Ciniecki as long as we can. I think stories that Leeds are looking to buy him is rather destabilising. After all, Ciniecki's only been at Celtic for the duration of September. He's had 2 months at Celtic. During that time, we've had a couple of international breaks. So he's in essence had about 4 weeks of football, 4 or 5 weeks of football as a Celtic player. Quite why Leeds didn't try and buy him from Hammarby when they had the opportunity to do so, I don't know. I would be very, very surprised to see Ciniecki leave Celtic so soon. He has, to be fair to Ciniecki, been a player who hasn't really stuck at many clubs for very long. It's a bit like Nicholas Kuhn. Nicholas Kuhn moved from one club to another club to another club. He hardly stayed anywhere for very long. A bit like Georgios Giakoumakis, another player who's rarely ever been at a club more than 2 years in a row. I would be very, very surprised to see Ciniecki moving on in January. I think he is a player, much like Nicholas Kuhn, much like Dyson Maida, who could be a very, very important player for Celtic for the next 2-3 years or so. If he keeps on progressing as well as he has done so far, I think he's a player who could go very high up in the game. He's still a relatively young man, so I think he's got a very high ceiling of potential and ability still to reach. Interesting point. Celtic 88. There's an argument that Ciniecki maybe looks better because what we've been getting down the right hand side hasn't been as good. I think Ciniecki is a player with a lot of ability. He is 2-footed, and generally 2-footed. That's the thing that a lot of Celtic's other players aren't particularly good with their non-natural foot. He is a player with a lot of pace, a lot of ability. His finishing probably could still do with a wee bit of an improvement. His final ball cross could do with a wee bit of improvement as well. I think the more he plays with Kenny and Osmond and Iheanacho and Yamada and Nygren and so on, the better, because I think he'll better develop understandings of just where Johnny Kenny wants the ball, or when Iheanacho comes back, where Iheanacho wants the ball, or where Dyson Maida wants the ball. Also, I think he'll learn. I think with another few months at Celtic, he'll learn much better at getting himself into the box at the back post, much like Dyson Maida often did. Lila Bada, Jota, all those players very much developed the ability to get into the box and be at the back post to pick up their good number of goals. Someone was talking about earlier on, Scott Sinclair scored an absolute ton of goals under Brendan Rodgers the first time around, coming in off his wide position to play at the back post. You make a very good point about Lila Bada. He had a really good start to his career in Major League Soccer, but it's really very much has died away. Quite why that is, I don't know. Quite a lot of players do have a wee bit of a bounce when they go to a new league because new teams aren't aware of quite how they play. To be fair to Lila Bada, I think he was a very, very successful player at Celtic. He scored for a player who was only 19, 20 when he came into the club under Ange Postecoglou. I think he was remarkably successful, scored a lot of goals in his first couple of seasons for Celtic, a lot of good creativity, scored some big goals in big games, goals against Rangers in a number of games. I was personally sad to see Abada go. I think his injury for 5 months came absolutely the worst possible time for him for a variety of reasons. Yes, Jota, I think all of us would agree that Jota is a really good player, tons of talent, creative, scores goals, creates goals, but he had an absolute terrible time in Saudi football, very poor time in poor time in French football as well, which is why we got to buy him back for around about £8 million about 10, 11 months ago. So we made an absolute gigantic big profit on. In essence, we sold Jota for 25 million and we got him back for about 8 million. And as it turned out, we got about 10 million for selling Kyogo the opposite way. So in many ways, buying Jota for somewhere between 6 and 8 million initially made something a big profit. And we got him back roughly for the same amount of money as we spent on him in the first place. So hi to everybody else who's joining joining recently. Typhoon McFlustery, Von Helsing as well. Hey to you. And I love your sentiment of being fellow champions, because Celtic are champions. It's something we can say for pretty much every single year for the last 15 years that we are the champions. We will be the champions. And I still think Celtic will be the champions of Scotland at the end of the season. Hearts have been dropping points in domestic football. I think that's going to keep on going. They're starting to run into one or two problems with injuries. They're starting to run into problems with suspensions. One of their two centre-backs is going to be suspended for the next match. I think that's going to be a recurring theme at Hearts, is their first choice players who they've pretty much kept together the whole way through the season. They're going to start to lose a few players. Possibly they might lose people like Braga and Kizaridis in the January transfer window. Thank you very much for the question, which is, after all, part of the problem. Part of the thing of these live streams is for people to debate and discuss pleasantly, politely, respectfully with each other. And also, if people want to know my opinion as another amateur Celtic fan for 50 odd years, it's also one of the points of these live streams is to ask for opinions, ask questions, ask other people what they think. I'm always happy to hear what other people think. Please do keep things family friendly, avoiding swear words, insulting people, etc. Because it's supposed to be fun for everybody. And while some people may think it's fun to use swear words, non-family friendly words, be abusive to people, for me it's not fun, and I think the great majority of us don't think it's fun. Anyway, to answer your question, Classman Numpty, I think Hearts' bubble is starting to burst. I think, as I said, I think they're going to start to run into more and more problems with injuries, more and more problems with suspension. And my personal feeling is that that Martin O'Neill is doing a good job. Primarily, he seems to have given the players confidence again, which I think is important. Is to give players confidence, and has got them playing together as a team. Now, admittedly, we got absolutely gubbed by Midtjylland, another team who are very well managed, good continuity. Although they changed their manager just a few months ago, they've kept a lot of the good things about Midtjylland. They've kept for years and years and years. They've got a really good development structure, a really good transfer structure, scouting structure. Really good at developing young Danish players and bringing them in. Very good at finding players from all around the world and fitting them into Danish football. And I think Midtjylland were a very well organised team, very well structured team, very well coached team. And Celtic, in parts, were able to compete with them. But we had a particularly bad spell of 15 minutes where we made so many errors in defence. And our midfielders didn't track back and help, and that put too much pressure on the Rolstons, especially on our right side, their left side, and we lost a lot of goals pretty much all 3 goals came from the left side of their attack, our right side of defence, and they scored. They're certainly looking at various different stories and supposed expert insiders with inside knowledge of Dermot Desmond and Peter Lawwell and Nicholson and stuff. Whether those people know what they're talking about, goodness only knows. But quite a lot of them are suggesting that, as well as Celtic having all these sort of recruitment meetings and interview meetings down in London over this week and next, that part of it also will be meeting up with Martin O'Neill, who was going to be down in London until Thursday, so today stroke yesterday, depending on quite where we are in terms of this live stream. So supposedly there were going to be meetings this week around about Thursday time between the executive people, Dermot Desmond, Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney as to the long-term structure. My biggest problem with keeping, I think if O'Neill stayed as Celtic manager, Celtic will keep on doing very well on the pitch. I think they'll remain a team that's cohesive and together as a team. I think the players will play for each other, play for the manager, play for the club. I think we'll play a good brand of football. I think we'll play winning football. My only worry is that having O'Neill being the manager when it's the January transfer window, I think could hold Celtic back. Bringing in a brand new manager in December might well give Celtic a couple of months where results, etc., take a bit of a dip. Quite whether Celtic could afford a couple of months of another couple of months of patchy results, I don't know, and keep themselves in the title race. I think, given the relative quality of Hearts and Rangers, who seem to be the other potential challengers for the title in the long run, I think probably we could afford to have a few draws over that period, just as the new manager gets used to things. So I think having O'Neill to the end of the season probably would be a good recipe for Celtic being successful in the short term. But I think in terms of the long term, we do really need a manager coming in December time to take us through the transfer window and the second half of the season. So basically, Typhoon McFlustery, to answer your question, yes, I would, if Celtic are looking in the short term, i.e., winning the league, winning 2 or 3 cups this season, maybe getting through to the Europa League knockout stage, I think having O'Neill as the manager would be a good recipe for that as a short-term success, i.e., stabilising things this season, keeping things being successful this season, and then starting afresh next summer. The problem with starting afresh next summer is obviously quite a lot of the players are going to be away on World Cup duty. Quite a lot of the players that Celtic might want to sign are going to be committed to playing for various different countries in the World Cup. We've also got potentially the likelihood of, assuming we win the league next May, we're probably going to be in 2 or 3 rounds of Champions League qualifiers if we wanted to get into the league stage. So I think in the short term, giving O'Neill the job to the end of the season would work in the short term. In the long term, I think Celtic do need a long-term manager with a long-term plan to take the club forward. I think we certainly need to win the great majority of the games over the next few weeks, a couple of months, etc. Again, the fixture congestion that we get over Christmas and New Year also is a factor which tends to cause teams like Hearts, Aberdeen, etc. to struggle more, simply because they haven't got the same depth of quality in their squad. I think Celtic, assuming we don't get terribly many more injuries, do have enough players to keep on coming in and making a difference. There's certainly have been quite a number of stories that do suggest that's going to be the case, is that O'Neill will be still in charge come the end of the year. Not convinced having Martin O'Neill as the manager during the transfer window is a good option, simply for long-term success, long-term continuity, bringing players in, unless the level of Celtic to scout and recruit players has significantly improved in the last few months. I think that's where a lot of Celtic's problems have been over the last few years. Our scouting and recruitment hasn't been nearly as good as it was in the first season, especially under Ange Postecoglou, when we brought in a whole heap of really good players. We also seemed to bring in some really good loan players who then later became Celtic full-time players, permanent players. Players like Jota and Carter Vickers being the two best examples. Players we've got in for season-long loans with a purchase clause at the end. For some reason or other, many of the loan deals we've had since that time seem to be simple loan deals. I would have been really, really happy. Unfortunately, he's injured at the moment, but I would have been really, really happy when we brought in Marcello Saracchi in the summer, that there was a definite buy clause at the end of that. That isn't the case. I think a buy clause at the end of Simpson Puzzi's loan contract is a different matter. Younger player, I think Man City see him as being a long-term player at their club, but Saracchi kind of was between clubs, not the first choice. With his parent club, I think he would have been an ideal player to get in as a purchase option at the end of his loan deal. But that doesn't seem to be what Celtic are doing nowadays with our loan deals, both loaning players out, but also loaning players in as well, because players like Luis Palma and Mike Nawrocki, who are both out on loan with European teams, for neither of them is there a compulsory purchase clause, and it would appear that the purchase price that Celtic have set for Luis Palma is too high for Lech Poznan to afford, so they say, and so it may be that Luis Palma is back at Celtic next summer, and maybe Celtic will use him the way that he's often used by Honduras, but particularly the way that he's been used by Lech Poznan in a different sort of role, and maybe at Celtic in a different sort of role he'll very much prosper. He's a player who actually has good goal scoring ability in that first half of his Celtic first season. Created a lot of goals in his first half of his first season. Good passer, good crosser, but didn't seem to fit into the Brendan Rodgers system, and so fell further and further down the pecking order. It's a good point, Pat McLaughlin, in terms of international breaks. Kind of. I think this 2-week international break for Celtic has, in some ways, been a wee bit beneficial. It's obviously given a few of the players who are injured a bit longer time to recover. Obviously, Osmond and Carter Vickers and Johnson are all going to be out till probably March at the earliest. Some suggestions that Carter Vickers won't be back at all this season. The way that Alistair Johnson was talking in his social media stuff, he was suggesting that he's hoping to be back to play for Celtic for a month or two at the end of this season. getting himself ready for the home World Cup next summer. So I suspect that if the recovery time for Johnson is him coming back in March or April, that'll much the same case for Callum Osmond. Still no definite date for Jota to come back. They keep on saying he'll be back in the new year. I think if he did even come back in January, it's going to take him quite a long time to get himself back up to full match fitness. Recovering from an anterior cruciate injury is always a very slow process. Takes quite a lot of rehab, quite a lot of fitness training, and I think it might take him quite a long time to get back to the levels that he was reaching just before he got injured. Good point, Ashley Breezy Ice. He's not actually had terribly much chance of first-team football at Hanover. Actually, I always quite liked Mike Nawrocki. One of the big problems, obviously, with Mike Nawrocki at Celtic was he was always injured. And so I think he found it very hard to establish himself in the squad. He and Lagerbielke were kind of brought in to be the number 2 and 3 choice behind Carter Vickers as our number 1 choice. Liam Scales was right at the start of that transfer window. He was going to be out the club, and Welsh was going to be the backup Scottish player. However, with Carter Vickers and Nawrocki and Welsh all getting injured within a couple of weeks of each other, it suddenly was Lagerbielke and Scales were our 2 main centre-backs. But I think Nawrocki did a good job when he did come in, when he was fit. He came in a couple of games last season and looked really, really good. But didn't seem ever really to fit into the Brendan Rodgers team. I don't think Rodgers really rated either Lagerbielke or Nawrocki. I'd be very happy to have Nawrocki back at the club. I think he had a lot of the skills that Celtic need. It's a very good point you raise. There have been a more than significant number of hamstring and muscle injuries at Celtic. Sebastian Chinecki, he was called up by Tunisia but came home without having played with a minor thigh strain. He had something similar about a month ago that caused him to miss about 4 or 5 days of football. Dyson Maida missed a couple of weeks of football with a sort of hamstring problem. It was also a bit of a back and calf problem. Obviously, Osmond, Johnston, Sirachi, and Iheanacho are all out we've all had long-term hamstring injuries. It should really be something that the physios, the sports science, and the medical people at Celtic should be analysing their training. From memory, Celtic had similar problems when Ange Postecoglou came in to be our manager back in 2021, 2022. For that season, we had quite a number of players going out with calf and thigh problems and hamstring problems and stuff. So oops. I honestly don't really know. Quite reportedly, Rodgers really liked Johnny Kenny as a player and as a person in training. Didn't look like Johnny Kenny really got a good chance to establish himself in the club. Pretty much as soon as Kelechi Iheanacho came into the club, Kenny, Yamada, Osmond all dropped down quite a number of rungs. Iheanacho seemed to be the one that Brendan Rodgers threw all these eggs into one basket in terms of making Iheanacho straight away our number 1 striker. I think Iheanacho, obviously having not played a terrible amount of football in the preceding few months, took a bit of time to get used to the club. I always thought that Osmond was a player with an awful lot of talent. He, from watching his games for the Fulham under-21 side in the English Premier League, under-21 league, He was a player with tons and tons of pace, really good finishing ability, and really good striker's instincts. And I think I always thought he was a player that could do really good at Celtic. Same way that Shin Yamada. Now, Shin Yamada didn't have a good season in 2025 in the J League, but he had a tremendous season in 2024 in the J League. He was one of the top scorers, top assists in that season. He's a player with lots and lots of pace. What a lot of other people who've seen him playing, he was playing for the B team just through the week. Quite a lot of people who saw him playing that game was that he was making some brilliant runs and beating defenders, but the teammates weren't passing the ball to him. And as a striker, you do very much rely on the wide players, the midfielders, the defenders giving you the right sorts of balls to run onto or the right sorts of crosses to attack. I think Yamada has a lot of good striker's instincts. He's got lots of pace. He thinks quickly. He runs quickly. He gets himself in good positions. But I don't quite think that the Celtic players quite knew how to service Yamada in the best way. Oops. So I honestly don't know. See, Yamada came with a good reputation for Japanese football. He'd made his international debut for Japan during the summer, and so he really should have been somebody that Celtic were looking to be their number 2 striker. Assuming that we feel that at the start of the season, Maieda's best position was on the left wing, probably. Given the fact that Ida scored 20 goals for Celtic the season before, he probably should have started as the number 1 striker within the squad. I think Yamada deserved to be the number 2 striker, Kenny Osmond being the younger backups. Very quickly, Ida left the club. Very quickly, Maeda got switched into the middle, and then I think Celtic for several months this season they've been chopping and changing. Different players in different positions, nothing really working out terribly well. We've had quite a lot of injuries this season as well, but we've also had quite a lot of rotation of squad. To come to your point, would I rest McGregor, Maeda, Tierney, Trusty against Feyenoord? I think probably the best. I think probably given the fact that Celtic have had an inconsistent start to the season, I would probably suggest keeping the bulk of our first choice starting 11 going, assuming that they're keeping basic levels of fitness and avoiding injuries. I think keeping a general 9 or 10 players playing keeping this. So with 11 players, 9 or 10 are in the next starting 11, and 9 or 10 are in the next starting 11, and 9 or 10 in the next starting 11. I think dropping 5 or resting 5, 6, 7 players is counterproductive because you lose a lot of that team cohesion, teamwork, team understanding, etc. So got no real problem with maybe resting 1 or 2 against Feyenoord, 1 or 2 in the next game, 1 or 2 in the next game, but keeping the same core of maybe 16 players playing together week in, week out, and maybe making 1 or 2 wee rotations here and there. But I think general wholesale changes is counterproductive, especially when it does appear that Celtic have tried to keep a core part of the team and then bring in 1 or 2 wee variations. Quite interesting. The last game, obviously, that Jamai Simpson-Puzzi got brought in at right back. He did a pretty decent job at right back. Not really a position he'd played terribly much before at Man City. Wasn't really a position that we had thought we was going to be using him in, but he did a pretty good job. I think another player that I would be interested to see how he's going to develop at Celtic is Hayata Inamura. Quite a lot of people who've seen Inamura play both in Japanese football and the brief time that we've seen him in pre-season and his 1 game for the first team think that he might actually be best as a sort of hybrid defensive midfielder centre-back position. Couple of the potential new managers quite like one of their defensive midfielders to be able to drop back in to be a a fifth centre-back, or a fifth defender. To a point, we had that sort of player with Nir Bitton primarily a midfielder, but he did drop back to being a centre-back, both as a starting position, but also as an extra defender at times. Hayato Inamura, maybe not big enough or strong enough to play in Scottish football as things stand, but lots of pace, really intelligent player, really good passer, good anticipation for cutting out passes and crosses, etc. So I think he might actually be quite a good hybrid centre-back defensive midfielder, which a couple of the managers that are supposedly lining up to be Celtic's manager, it's a position that they quite like one of their players to play. Yes, so I'm glad we both agree. I think Celtic will win the title. I think Celtic will win the title pretty much every single year. And I think we are in the final against St Mirren. I would be disappointed if we don't beat St Mirren in 1 month's time. I think it's the 14th of December, roughly that date. I'd be disappointed if we don't beat St Mirren. St Mirren are a team that we've beaten on a very, very consistent basis. Admittedly, it was just 1-0 the last time, but we were all over them. Yes, I think there's an argument to say that Hatate, admittedly, I think Hatate did have a pretty good season last season for Celtic. The season before, he had a lot of injuries. He's been very slow to get going this season. He's had 1 or 2 good games, 1 or 2 good half games, but he's not been the Rio Hatate that he was when he first came to us. He's not really been the Rio Hatate that we'd got to know. I think he would probably have been. I said this before. I think he probably would have been out the club last summer or the summer just past. Was it not for the fact that he was recovering from injury, from the injury he got in May of 2025 against Aberdeen in that evening game? I think if he had a full pre-season, I think he probably would have been off to England or France or somewhere this summer. But I think because he had been injured in May and June, that nobody came in for him. It's an interesting one because certainly with Jota we see him rather a lot on social media. He's been in the crowd on several different occasions, but he doesn't seem, as far as I can see, to be making any kind of progress in terms of getting himself back into first team action. Maybe he's doing an absolute ton of work with the physios, the sports therapists, the doctors, the orthopedic surgeons, the sports medicine specialists at the club, and that he's doing all the right sorts of rehab. Maybe he's bang on course for getting back in January. We don't really know. He seems to be out and about an awful lot. I think Carter Vickers, Osmond and Johnson have all had operations, so I think it's probably fair to accept that they are injured. Iheanacho, I think a lot of people felt that Iheanacho was going to be back into the team already by now. When he went off, it didn't look like it was such a significant injury, unlike Johnson, who the first time around and the second time around looked like he was really, really struggling. Sirachi also looked like he was struggling when he went off. Obviously, Callum Osmond was carried off on a stretcher, so I don't think we can really accuse him of not being injured. But it's an interesting one, and as I think another thing that Celtic could really do with is at their press conferences having someone from the physio, the medical department coming on to give a brief update on how the various different players are doing in terms of their fitness, their rehab, etc. Can't remember who it was that raised the point about the fact that Celtic are having a lot of players with hamstring and muscle injuries. It would be interesting to see whether they had some form of explanation as to why Celtic are having all these injuries. We seem to be having more than our normal, expectable fair share of these sorts of injuries. It could be something to do with the training regimes. It could be something to do with the players that we've got. Certain players are more prone to certain sorts of injuries than others. It'd be interesting to see what Celtic are doing to try and stop these injuries occurring. I think hamstring injuries and calf strains and stuff are always going to happen, but we do seem to have had a lot more than our fair share. I think Rio Hatate is a player that divides opinion. I like Rio Hatate as a player, but I fully accept that his form this season has been very, very patchy. He tends to be a player that does take a few more risks than any other player. He hits some absolutely brilliant passes. He also probably too often hits a dangerous pass that gets Celtic into trouble. That's a good point, and that's one of the things which I think is a lot more difficult to gauge as a simple fan, is what the sorts of attitudes of players, how that impacts on other players within the squad. I think the attitude of players like Callum McGregor, James Forrest, Alison Johnston, who all appear to me as being great, and Liam Scales being another, as all being really great team players. I think that really does help team morale, team spirit, team bonding, etc. Possible if you have got players who are unhappy behind the scenes, be it Hatate, be it Maeda, O'Reilly before that, Kuhn before that. A lot of suggestion that Kuhn in the second half of last season was angling to get away. He wasn't very happy. And for the second half of last season, he was kind of grumbling and moaning behind the scenes. I don't think Dyson Maeda is the same sort of person as that, but I think no doubt Dyson Maida's team morale and team spirit went down when he failed to get his transfer in August and September. He does seem to be back nearly to his normal self. I think Rio Hatate is a more of a quieter, I think he more internalises things. I don't think also Dyson Maeda is actually quite an internal player as well. So I don't think that either he or Maeda show their emotions quite so much. Particularly Hatate doesn't show much emotion. So whether he is actually a negative effect on team morale behind the scenes, I don't know. In terms of watching them doing their training sessions, the squad now does seem an awful lot more together, a lot more happy, smiling, interacting well when you see them on the pitch after the games and their training sessions on video from Lennoxtown. Interesting point. I think it's really difficult to say who the greatest player to play for Celtic is. My all-time favourite Celtic player is Kenny Dalglish. He was my first hero when I first started supporting in the early 70s. I think Henrik Larsson was an absolutely stupendous player for Celtic. Great performances, never let Celtic down, really committed to the club, scored an absolute ton of goals. He was at Celtic when Celtic had their comeback in 2000. Other great players I really have always liked: Shunsuke Nakamura, Lubomir Moravcik. I really like players with a bit of magic about them. Jimmy Johnson, his career was kind of winding down when I started being a Celtic supporter. I think he had a lot of problems with his injuries, one or two problems behind in sort of family life and personal life at that point as well. So greatest player I've ever seen for Celtic, I would say, is Kenny Dalglish, closely followed by Henrik Larsson, with a big vote for people like Shunsuke Nakamura, Lubomir Moravcik, who for me were complete and utter magical players. And if we had any of those players in our current team, I think we would be incredibly difficult to beat. Players like Moravcik and Nakamura could often not really be in the game, and then suddenly a piece of magic, and it was a goal. They've scored a goal, piece of magic, and they've created a chance for somebody else. Or with Nakamura, any kind of free kick near the other opposition goal mouth, and there was always a high chance we were going to score a goal. Incredible success rate Nakamura had with free kicks in and around the penalty box. Yes, Paul McStay, tremendous servant to the club. Reportedly could have gone off to play in Europe and England, etc., but stayed at Celtic all his life. Obviously a player that came through Celtic's youth system, a player who got his debut for Celtic, I think around about the age of 18, and having had a really good debut, kept his place in the side. So the last player we had like that really was Kieran Tierney, coming through our youth structure, got a chance in the team, was in and out a wee bit to start with, but once he made his place in the team, he was one of Celtic's first choice players. George Connolly, again, right at the start of my career as a Celtic supporter, he was a super duper player. Also had one or two wee problems off the pitch as well, which maybe held him back as a player, but really, really talented player. Not out of place alongside the McGrains and the Douglashes and the Davy Hayes and Paul Wilsons and Dixie Deans and Harry Hoods, etc. He was a super duper player. But maybe one or two off the pitch problems held him back. Yep. I don't know what people's relative ages are. Part of the reason that for me, Kenny Dalglish is my favourite, greatest player of all time, really probably is, as I say, he was just starting to make his way in the team in the early 70s, starting to establish himself as one of the regular first team starters. And he was very, very successful, moving into being a Scotland international. So he was kind of Celtic's best young player, and for that reason, he became my favourite players. Maybe that's the case yourselves with Paul McStay. He was kind of, when you were at that younger age, he was the Celtic hero player, and what we would do for a player like Paul McStay, taking charge of midfield, leading the club, leading the players. Again, we would really, really benefit from having him, a player like him. Yes. Oops. I would certainly say Alan Thompson was a player in the Martin O'Neill 2000-2005 team that was one of these underestimated players. Scored a good number of goals, created a good number of goals. Also was a player more than happy to mix it with other players. And again, I don't really get the feeling in this current squad, apart from Alistair Johnson, that there's really anybody who week in, week out will mix it with other players. Callum McGregor did show a bit of that fight and bite and nastiness in the Rangers match, but a lot of the other games he's played, he hasn't really been that player who's enforced his personality on the game, enforced his personality on the opposition. Alan Thompson, all right, yeah. Pierre Van Hooijdonk, as I said, we were talking about him a wee bit earlier on. Tremendously talented player, scored an absolute ton of goals for Celtic. Absolute ton of goals. And again, talking a wee bit maybe about Rio Tati, I think Pierre Van Hooijdonk, Paolo Di Canio probably weren't very good for team spirit and team morale and team bonding and so on. I think they were probably very difficult people to manage in terms of being the manager or coaches, etc. at the club. Davy Provan was another of my favourite players when I was a wee bit younger as well. Gordon McLeod, again, good hard worker for Celtic. Played both those two players, Provan and McLeod, played for Celtic for good long periods of times. Good creative players, seemed to really commit themselves to the club. Sorry, the reason I was a wee bit startled was I've set myself an alarm to wind down the live stream around about the 3 hour mark. That was something, my alarm going off to say that we'd been going for 3 hours. So that was the only reason that I might have been a wee bit startled, was that was my alarm going off to say that we've been talking for 3 hours, and that probably some people have already done. It's probably time for us to think about winding things down. Frank McGarvey, Frank McGarvey, good player for Celtic, good player for St Mirren, had a very, very brief spell at Liverpool, came back to Scottish football. Again, good, hard-working player, scored a good number of goals for Celtic, and also had one or two wee problems off the pitch as well, but came back, rebuilt his life, and then became a sort of Celtic ambassador type person. Celtic fans, even in that when he was a wee bit older, he came back to support Celtic just as a Charlie Nicholas. Not in terms of as a player, as a goal scorer, Charlie Nicholas, again, very, very good for Celtic. Again, I felt that Charlie Nicholas probably wasn't tremendously good for team spirit, team bonding, team cohesion, etc. Obviously, he went off to Arsenal, wasn't successful, but with them, came back to Celtic later in his career, hasn't been tremendously supportive of Celtic. Now that he's an ex-player, another player very much along the same ilk as Charlie Nicholas, Frank McAvenny, again, no one could doubt, really talented goal scorer and really talented player, scored lots and lots of goals for Celtic. Again, not really a player, now that he's an ex-player, that is tremendously pro-Celtic in the kinds of things that he says. Not that a player has to be loyal to the club and so on after they leave the club, but it is, I think, much more preferable to hear people like Chris Sutton, John Hartson, Stilian Petrov, Neil Lennon, Charlie Mulgrew, lots and lots of players who are ex-Celtic players who come back, and they clearly are Celtic through and through, Celtic through and through, and are massively supporting Celtic as Celtic supporters. Kieran Tierney, another person who, even though he was living down in London, came back to support Celtic beyond the terraces with many of his friends and families from younger days. All I would say is that everybody within a football club has their job, has their role. Some people's role is to boost team morale, team spirit, etc. That's primarily going to be your players and your coaches and your manager, your physios, your medical people. It's their job to get players happy, fit, playing together, psychologically strong. If they are low in their confidence, needing boosted, needing built up, doing that. So I think there are plenty of people in a football club whose job is to boost team morale, etc. And I think there are plenty of people whose job in a club is to make the club financially strong, make sure that they've got the money to buy new players, or more importantly, reward the players they've got by giving them good long-term contracts. There are a lot of players at Celtic who are now on high levels of contracts for long contracts. That generally does create club loyalty, keeps a player at the club for the longer term. Callum McGregor, Ralston, Forrest, all got very, very, very well rewarded. Players like Hatati, Maeda, really well rewarded now. Jota and Tierney, very well rewarded. And I think that keeps players at the club. It shows that you're committed to them. Also, if they sign a new extended contract, that shows commitment the other way around as well. So I think that everybody within a team, within a club, has their role in the team. And primarily player selection, player development, team tactics, formations, winning games. That's primarily the job of the players, the coaches, and the backroom staff who are there for fitness and rehab and injuries and so on. Yes, and when everybody is doing their job to their best of ability, the club becomes more and more successful, more and more strong. And over the last 2 or 3 years, I don't think Celtic's had the same cohesion in all the various departments on and off the pitch, and I think that's led to things kind of collapsing in the first half of this season. And I do think that with the right sort of manager coming in soon, all these things can be reversed, but things are going to take. I think Celtic can be successful right from the start, but longer term goals will take 2 or 3 years to achieve. Thank you very much, Classman Numpty. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for all your comments and questions. Thanks for your positivity. And going to be having another one, all things going to plan, next Thursday, and probably again at 9 o'clock. Oops, sorry. Yes, super player. Cadete super player as well. All too brief that we had him at the club. Goodbye to you as well, Paul McGuire. It's been an interesting debate. Lots of different opinions going forward. Lots of different solutions. Lots of different theories as to who Celtic should go for in terms of. So lots of different interesting theories, lots of different interesting points of view. It's now gone midnight. We've been going for 3 hours and 10 minutes, just about. So I think we should start to tail things off. Kyogo is a super player for Celtic. Not convinced that we used him quite to the best of his ability in the season and a half, 2 seasons that we had Kyogo under Brendan Rodgers. I think he worked best in the system that Ange Postecoglou had for him. Don't think he worked so well dropping deeper. I think he was a brilliant player for Celtic when he was hanging about on the shoulder of the last defender. Really clever runs into the box. Very good at creating space for himself. Very good for creating space for others to come in behind him, coming off the wing, come in from the midfield. I think Kyogo was a brilliant team player. His form for Rennes, when he went to Rennes for that half season, was really rather poor. His form at Birmingham's been rather patchy as well. He is over 30 years old as well now, and so not unusual for strikers once they get into their early 30s for some of their skills, which rely on pace, etc., to start to disappear. Yes, So I think Breezy Eyes, Kyogo is a really good player. Obviously, one of Ange Postecoglou's very first signings. We bought him for around about £4 million from Japanese football. He was one of the best players in Japan at the time, and was the first of several very good Japanese players that we got, and came into Scottish football, scored a ton of goals. Unfortunately, got himself injured. Second season, scored an absolute ton of goals. His later couple of seasons for Celtic, a bit more patchy, one or two injury problems, one or two differences in terms of how he's being asked to play his position. Thank you very much, Pope Leo the 14th. It's obviously, for me, much nicer to get positive feedback and people saying nice things about me and saying nice things about the channel, nice things about our live streams. I think we can all share opinions and we can all be pleasant, polite, not be using swear words, not being nasty, rude, abusive. I think we can all be all have different opinions and share them in a friendly fashion. We are all supposed to be Celtic supporters. We're all supposed to be supporting the same football club. We're all supposed to be hoping for the same thing in the short term, medium term, and long term. So, thank you very much, Pope Leo the 14th. Well, Monty, as always, everyone is entitled to their opinion. You don't like my opinion. Other people do like my opinion. Other people don't like my opinion, but are pleasant, polite, and willing to get on with me and get on with other Celtic supporters. Yep. So Kyogo, someone was saying that he did a great job for us, winning the League Cup final pretty much by himself. Had quite a lot of injury problems, obviously, in that season. Questionable whether he should have been playing for Celtic, but he played 100% for the club. Helped us win the cup. Helped us win the league over that course of that season. Although we missed a lot of the second half to that season. Luckily, Giakoumakis came in and took up the. Yes, so you're entirely right. He would, I'm sure, be in a lot of discomfort, but he was inspirational, committed 100% to the club, and he helped us win the cup, and he remained a very good Celtic player right till the very end of his Celtic career. As I say, his career's taken a bit of a downturn after leaving Celtic. Whether he would have kept on playing as well as he had been at Celtic had he stayed longer, who knows? Whether he would have had the drop off in his career had he stayed at Celtic, again, we don't really know. We can never tell what's going to happen. I think, unfortunately, international breaks are the only real other solutions would be to have all the international games all in one clump. Let's say at the end of a season, or the start of a season, or in shutting down all the leagues all around the world and having all your internationals in one particular month. I think probably the best solution is what we have at the moment. I think it is very disruptive to clubs to have players going off to all parts of the world. Obviously, players like Balikwisha and Trusty and Maeda are all flying hundreds of thousands of miles. Some of them might well be flying hundreds of thousands of miles and not actually playing, being on the bench. I think that's counterproductive. I think in terms of allowing players who remain at the club to get going with training, get going with rehab, etc. I think international breaks are good. I think having international breaks also gives players like McGregor, Tierney, McGregor, and now Hatate, several others, a chance to have a few days off. McCowan have a few days off, recharge their batteries, and then come back into training. I think it's also quite useful. But I think it's a necessary impediment to the club to have international breaks. I think having all your internationals in one clump at the start of the season or end of the season, I think that's also going to be disrupt obviously pre-season training at one end, or the players having a natural break between one season and the next. So I think probably having 3 or 4 international breaks is probably the best way to do it. Certainly nowadays we're having a couple of games in quick succession, and then the players can come back to the club. Anyway. So we're well gone midnight. We're now into Friday, having started off on Thursday. So I think we probably should start to call it a day. I think we should wind things down. And finish off the live stream here. Planning to do another live stream next Thursday. Hopefully by next Thursday we'll have more certainty whether Martin O'Neill is staying for a bit longer, whether one of the supposed 3 shortlisted candidates is coming in. Hopefully by this time next week we'll know more certainly are we keeping going with O'Neill for another 2 or 3 months? Are we going to keep going with O'Neill for a month and then have a definite start date for McKenna or Knutson or Hayden or Nonsi or whomever? I wish it was as simple as that. As I say, at the moment, all we're getting are stories from the Fabrizio Romanos and the people at Sky Sports and various different Celtic websites, fan sites, who say that they've got this insider at the club and they know this is what's going to happen. Reportedly, several different people seem to know exactly what Dermot Desmond is saying and thinking. None of this really seems to be coming to pass. Just as soon as we see that Hayden wants to come to the club, you then get another story saying that Celtic haven't contacted Hayden. We get the stories that Knutson definitely wants to leave Bodø Glimt at the end of November. We then now get the stories that he wants to stay until January, or he wants to stay for another 2 or 3 years. And we get very contrasting stories as to we get contrasting stories regarding what Wilfred Nancy's plans are in terms of Columbus Crew. We get contrasting stories regarding Robbie Keane and Kieran McKenna. And then new names come out of nowhere. Somebody was raising Roberto Mancini as a name. And certainly it was of 2 or 3 Celtic sites to that forward as being a real possibility. Some other people have suggested Jurgen Klopp, which I think is fanciful. A couple of the managers of Borussia Dortmund, Marcus Rose was briefly lined up to be Celtic. I think we'll know who the Celtic manager is when it gets announced. And I think up until that point, it's all going to be speculation. Thank you, Typhoon McFlustery. I've never been compared to being a Greek philosopher before. As I said right at the start, I've been a wee bit under the weather the last couple of days with a bit of a cold and a flu. So I had been planning to shave the beard down quite a bit, but unfortunately haven't really been filling up to it. So anyway, so having said all that, I think we'll call it a day in terms of the live stream. We've been going for nearly 3.5 hours. Thank you for everybody who has contributed. Thank you for everybody who has made comments, put forward theories, shared their theories and opinions with each other. Planning to do the same thing again next Thursday. Hopefully by then we'll have got more finality regarding the position of the manager and how things are going to be on and off the pitch. And we'll have new things to talk about. And again, thank you, Typhoon McFlustery, for the positive feedback. It very much encourages me to keep on going with things. And so, as I said, thank you very much for everyone who's contributed, and see you all again next Thursday. On the Wednesday before, I will do a wee confirmation of the time and the date, etc. But we would plan to do it at 9 o'clock next Thursday, and so until Thursday next Thursday at 9 o'clock. Goodbye and hail, hail.